Can the war in Ukraine ever truly end under Vladimir Putin's iron grip? The question hangs in the air like the acrid smoke of countless battles. Over 3 years have dragged on, with Putin endlessly commanding his troops to hurl themselves at Ukrainian lines. Picture the deafening roar of artillery fire echoing through frozen fields, the gritty taste of dust coating soldiers' throats as they charge forward. Millions mourn every month as thousands perish, all thanks to a leader who refuses to see defeat staring him in the eyes. Russia aimed to reclaim what it thought was rightfully its, but instead, it's spiraling into a catastrophic quagmire, weakened to its core both within and beyond its borders. How far will this mistake drag Russia down before someone pulls the plug? As a top NATO admiral warns, the conflict is wasting lives in a futile grind that cries out for talks. Just imagine the boots crunching through snow-stained mud, the faint aroma of gunpowder lingering in the mist. Giuseppe Cavo-Dragone, head of NATO's military committee from January 2025, told the BBC on November 2 that Russia's attritional plan, meant to exhaust Ukraine over time, has backfired spectacularly. Now, it's Russia's forces drowning in their own stagnant swamp of blunders. The admiral noted that operationally, it's high time to negotiate because this endless slaughter achieves nothing. Does Putin hear the cries of grief echoing from every Russian home, or is he deaf to the agony his stubbornness unleashes? Having covered the admiral's grim outlook on conversations stalled by Putin's refusal to yield, we dive into the brutal toll on Russia's military might. That advisor painted a picture of a war bogged down like quicksand, sucking in lives for no gain. Yet the cold statistics scream louder than any explosion, revealing how Russia hemorrhages troops and gear to fuel this so-called special operation. Feel the rough metal of shattered tanks chilling to the touch, hear the distant thrum of drones vanishing into silence. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense reports over 1.14 million Russian personnel killed, wounded, or captured from the invasion's start through November 4. Equipment losses paint an even darker scene. As Ukraine's figures show, Russia lost more than 11,300 tanks, either wrecked or beyond repair. Imagine the clang of twisted armor hitting the ground in defeat. Around 34,250 armored vehicles and over 66,500 vehicles and artillery systems share the same fate. How many more machines will crumble before Russia admits the scale of its folly? Air defenses crumble too, with roughly 1,200 anti-aircraft units in ruins, 428 fighter jets downed, and 346 helicopters silenced forever. But the aerial agony continues with a mind-boggling loss of 77,860 unmanned drones shot from the sky by Ukrainian guns. Sense the buzz of propellers fading into a void, the oily stench of engine smoke hanging heavy. These aren't mere setbacks, they're a financial abyss draining Russia's coffers dry. What's the hidden price behind this endless drain, and will it finally shatter the illusion of victory? Picking up from the staggering equipment and troop hemorrhages that turn Russia's military into a ghost of itself, we shift to the economic wounds festering within. Those aircraft and tanks aren't just metal heaps, they drag billions into the abyss of Putin's miscalculations. Can you feel the pinch of empty wallets, hear the collective sigh of families burdened by rising prices? The toll stretches beyond battlefields, eroding Russia's economy as frozen assets and sanctions bite. Reports from February highlight how 3 years of war have crippled finances, freezing around $340 billion in reserves and slashing energy revenues by $78.5 billion. Over 460 companies fled Russia amid the chaos, compounding the pain. Wireless growth fueled by wartime shifts is fading fast, with World Economic Outlook projecting annual growth slow to 1.4% in 2025 and 1.2% in 2026. By October 30, Moscow Times revealed an even harsher reality, a third straight quarter of sluggish expansion, economy inching only 1% higher in the first 9 months of 2025, far below the pace of 2024. Whom does this economic bleed serve, when survival hangs by a thread? Meanwhile, a term called death economics, coined by economist Vladislav Inozemtsev, exposes how Russia birthed a fake middle class profiting from the fighting. Mothers and wives urge sons to enlist, lured by death payouts and salaries that dodge unemployment or drunken despair. But as bodies pile and fears mount, that comfort morphed into terror, pride and sudden wealth give way to dread. Smell the sharp metallic twinge of blood-soaked uniforms, hear whispers of grief in candlelit homes. Ukraine retaliates deep into Russia, bombing refineries and plants, sparking fuel crises and soaring costs. Is this the tipping point where internal cracks widen beyond repair, forcing Russia to confront the true cost of Putin's gamble? Revisiting the economic rot and shifting fears at home that bite deeper than any sanction, we explore how Putin's invasion ripples far beyond Ukraine's borders. That inner turmoil wasn't meant to be this war's legacy, it was supposed to end swiftly, like Putin boasted in 2014 to The Guardian, conquering Ukraine in mere weeks. Fast forward over a decade, and weeks morphed into nearly 4 years of delusion. Intelligence from NBC News on October 28 shows no Putin willingness to soften demands for peace. U.S. sources call him more entrenched than ever, along with his military and economy. So why continue bleeding lives and dollars? Neither stubbornness nor faith in a proven weak force justifies it. Even success might leave Russia broken for generations, a shadow of potential. Yet the damage extends outward, strengthening NATO against Putin's dreams. USNI News details how Sweden's entry shores up Baltic defenses, granting NATO over a century's submarine expertise and patrol near St. Petersburg. Touch the cool waters of the Baltic Sea, imagine waves lapping as new threats loom. RAND high-ranking officer Marta Kepper noted Sweden's land enables basing for U.S. allies, deterring Russian aggression without turning the sea into a full NATO dominion. The outlet warns this 145,000 square mile expanse isn't fully controllable, but reinforcements amplify pressure. Alongside Finland's inclusion, NATO plugs old gaps near Russia's edge. Does Putin grasp how his push united enemies he sought to divide? And what's next as expansion fuels even greater resolve? Building on NATO's surge from Putin's missteps, that shouldn't be starting the alliance's new chapter. Freedom's aggression aimed to weaken balding European ties, but it fortified them. As BBC reported in June, all allies pledged defense spending hikes to 5% of GDP by 2035, spurred by calls from former President Donald Trump. Feel the weight of commitment in those promises, hear the echo of old warnings now heeded. NATO underpins Ukraine with drones too. A plan from RBC Ukraine on November 3 will arm the eastern flank by mid-2026, countering Russia's aerial havoc. Imagine the hum of new unmanned sentinels, the electric tension in the air. This isn't what Putin envisioned, his strategy turned unity into a fortress. Can Russia emerge from this self-made trap, or is retreat the only path left? The question lingers like smoke over a battlefield, as Putin's grip threatens more than one nation. But what unexpected reversal might finally force change? In the midst of enduring chaos, the conflict in Ukraine shows no signs of resolution. President Vladimir Putin relentlessly pushes his troops into futile battles against resilient Ukrainian defenses. Month after month, thousands of Russian soldiers sacrifice their lives, spurred on by a leader seemingly blind to the grave consequences of his relentless campaign. As time drags on, profound ramifications unfold, revealing a strategic defeat for Russia that extends far beyond the battlefield. Enter Admiral Giuseppe Carvo Dragon of NATO, who decisively declares Putin's losses. Speaking candidly to the BBC, he characterizes the conflict as a harmful stalemate. The envisioned attrition strategy aimed at debilitating Ukraine has tragically backfired, trapping Russia in an ever-deepening quagmire of its own making. The stark numbers paint a grim picture. Over 1.14 million Russian soldiers have been killed, injured, or captured since this debacle began, and the destruction continues unabated. On the equipment front, the losses are equally staggering. Russia has seen over 11,300 tanks rendered wrecks, approximately 34,250 armored vehicles lie damaged or destroyed, leaving the nation in a precarious situation where its military might is dwindling. The air war has taken an equally, if not more, devastating toll. With around 1,200 anti-aircraft units in ruins and nearly 900 aircraft, including 428 planes and 346 helicopters brought to the ground, these figures underscore a collective military might that now seems almost impotent against Ukraine's spirited resistance. But what lies beneath these statistics? This conflict isn't merely a battle for territory, it has morphed into a colossal economic burden for Russia. It's a struggle over resources and a fight to maintain morale in the face of staggering losses. As the National Security Journal elucidates, Putin's management of military and economic pressures has created a phenomenon termed deathnomics. This concept describes an artificial class in Russia that, in a cruel twist, finds financial opportunity amidst the relentless bloodshed. Families encourage their sons to enlist, hoping the battlefield will grant them a paycheck that local unemployment cannot. Yet, as the tides of war turn, the initial pride of sending a soldier to defend their homeland fades into a deep-seated fear. Too many lives are extinguished. Under Dragon's evaluation, a weakening military is now faltering so significantly that Ukraine is beginning to launch strikes deep into Russian territory, hitting oil refineries and essential infrastructure. The reality is brutal. As these attacks unfold, Russia does not just suffer losses in manpower but faces crippling fuel shortages and soaring prices. As the fog of war thickens, an urgent question arises: how long can Russia sustain this attrition while maintaining its facade of power, especially in light of the ongoing financial strain? The unyielding pressure of warfare has led to sanctions that have crippled Russia's economy, freezing approximately $340 billion in resources, while simultaneously inflicting an additional $78.5 billion loss to the energy sector over 3 years. Out of desperation, over 460 companies have abandoned Russia, further isolating its economy in this global conflict. The years bleed on, and the expected quick victory has devolved into an endless struggle. Shifting from a violent wave of anticipated conquest, Russia's quest to dominate Ukraine now seems hopelessly stymied. Admiral Dragon aptly suggests that negotiations will soon be imperative. But what remains as the persistent hurdle? Putin's steadfast unwillingness to accept the reality of a war gone awry is increasingly evident. Recent analyses show he remains more entrenched than ever, unwilling to compromise on terms that could halt the bloodshed. As thousands of soldiers fall and billions of dollars vanish, it becomes clear that Putin's determination is inflicting sustained wounds on both people and the nation's finances. Yet it is not just the battlefield outcomes that loom ominously over Russia. Outside its borders, the fallout from this invasion has fortified NATO's alliances in unexpected ways. Far from the weakened position he hoped to create, Putin has unintentionally propelled NATO towards unprecedented unity. With countries like Sweden and Finland joining NATO as a direct reaction to his actions, the geopolitical landscape has irrevocably shifted. These nations, rich in military experience, now bolster NATO's strategic objectives, especially in the crucial Baltic region. This represents a strategic blunder for Russia as NATO fortifies its presence, cementing defenses that were previously deemed vulnerable. Putin's actions were intended to instigate fear and disarray among NATO's ranks. Instead, they rallied collective strength and determination. NATO now faces the East with unprecedented resolve, planning to enhance its capabilities, not just maintaining the status quo but evolving to meet new threats. How much longer can this bitter conflict escalate while Russia's grip on power slips? The world watches intently, as the war's echoes reverberate through every corner of the globe. The clock ticks down, leaving Putin caught in a web of his own making, embroiled in a war that was never meant to last this long. As the ripples from this conflict expand, what will the next chapter hold for a nation ensnared by its ambitions? The answers may lie in a future that remains uncertain and fraught with peril. Imagine the bitter sting of frozen winds biting into your skin as Russia's economy cracks under the weight of endless conflict. Fuel hunger grips the nation, prices soaring like wildfire. And the screams of fallen soldiers echo in the distance. Yet this is just the surface. We've explored how Ukraine hammers Russia's resolve, bleeding lives and resources dry. Now, the true financial abyss opens up, deeper than Putin ever dreamed. What's the shocking reality? Putin never bargained for a 3-year bloodbath that would shackle his nation in crippling sanctions, freezing $340 billion in reserves like icebound treasures. How could one man's arrogance unleash such havoc, stripping Russia's energy sector of $78.5 billion in brutal losses? Feel the chill of isolation as over 460 companies flee, their departure leaving a void that smells of decay and despair. Putin's war machine pumped artificial prosperity, inflating growth artificially. But now, the World Economic Outlook warns, expansion plunges to a mere 1.4% by 2025. Then 1.2% in 2026. The rhythm of decline pounds like a relentless drum. It might spiral even deathlier. On October 30th, the Moscow Times unveiled Russia's third straight economic contraction. In the first 9 months of 2025, growth limped to just 1%. over 4 times slower than 2024. The acrid stench of failure permeates everything. Why? Because Russia is ensnared in this quagmire of its own making, a tactical snare dragging the nation into oblivion. This special military operation was no multi-year saga in Putin's grand plan. He envisioned a swift conquest, a walk in the park. Back in 2014, as The Guardian chronicled, Putin boasted Russia could overrun all of Ukraine in mere weeks if unleashed. Decades later, that boast echoes as mockery, weeks stretched into nearly 4 agonizing years. The metallic clang of weapons firing futilely rang out. The sour taste of defeat coats every breath. As Dragon cautions, Russia must negotiate soon. Or later. The blockade? Putin's iron grip himself. His blindness to the crushing cost of his blunders in Ukraine fuels his defiance. He'll cling to delusions, refusing compromise as long as he draws breath. That's the stark view from a U.S. intelligence assessment, reported by NBC News on October 28. Analysts spot zero willingness to budge on peace deal demands. A senior U.S. official and a congressional heavyweight concur, Putin digs in deeper, entrenching his military and economy alike. So, troops vanish in the fray, equipment crumbles to dust, thousands monthly. Billions bleed away in economic ruin. Putin's folly blends obstinacy with illusions of might, a military faltering against its own shadows. Russia claws for victory, but at what price? Victory here would carve weakness permanent, a scar etching decades. This wreckage inside Ukraine looms large. But brace yourself, the fallout beyond Ukrainian borders ignites even greater tempests, as NATO seizes the flames for strength. What cataclysmic twist awaits next, as Putin's invasion backfires into NATO's unshakable fortress, ready to strike where it hurts most? The air thickens with dread, alliances sharpening like blades poised for the kill. As the Ukraine conflict drags on with no resolution in sight, the impact of Vladimir Putin's decisions grows increasingly dire for Russia. Under his command, troops continue to suffer heavy losses, yet he remains unyielding, trapped in a conflict that seems to deepen with every passing month. Despite the immense toll on his military, Putin clings to the belief that his strategy might still turn the tide. The question that lingers is, how much longer can this situation sustain itself before it collapses entirely? Admiral Giuseppe Carvo Dragone, a NATO Military Committee chair, recently outlined why Putin has already lost the war. According to Dragone, the war has bogged down into a futile struggle, a waste of countless lives. While Putin intended to tire Ukraine out, it has backfired spectacularly, leaving Russia stranded in a quagmire of its own making. The grim statistics illustrate the truth. Over 1.14 million Russian soldiers have been either killed, injured, or captured since the invasion began, while an astonishing number of military assets have been obliterated. On the front lines, Russia's air defenses are struggling just as much. They have lost hundreds of aircraft and thousands of drones, leaving their military strength severely compromised. The cost of this persistent conflict weighs heavily on Russia's resources as well, with estimates suggesting that over $340 billion in reserves has been frozen, in addition to staggering losses in the energy sector. As the economic pain intensifies, families back home are no longer proud of military service but gripped by fear and uncertainty over their loved ones' fates. One startling revelation shows the unintended consequences of Putin's military ambitions, the eastward expansion of NATO. Rather than diminish NATO's influence, Russia's actions have prompted the alliance to bolster its presence significantly. Sweden and Finland have joined NATO, shaking the long-held regional dynamics. This shift not only enhances NATO's strategic footing but also raises pressing questions for Russia. How can they confront a now unified front that stands ready to counter any attempts at aggression? Putin's obstinacy and refusal to acknowledge the strategic oversights of his invasion are evident. While he believes he can force changes in Ukraine, the reality is he has only provoked a stronger NATO. In an ironic twist, the conflict meant to assert Russia's strength has led to its isolation and vulnerability. The more he digs in his heels, the more the sands shift beneath his feet, leaving a military that is not only depleted but unprepared for a protracted engagement. Sooner or later, he will be forced to confront the stark reality of his choices. How long can a leader ignore the mounting evidence of failure before it inevitably crumbles beneath him? As the war ravages on, both the economic fabric and military capacity of Russia are faltering. The stakes could not be higher, and the question lingers, will Putin adapt or will he cling to a crumbling strategy, dragging his nation further into chaos? In the last segment, we explored how Sweden's vast submarine expertise empowers NATO to control crucial waterways near Russia's St. Petersburg, filling strategic gaps that once left vulnerabilities exposed. This shift transforms neutral zones into fortified NATO strongholds, directly fueled by Putin's aggressive moves in Ukraine. Now, imagine the chill of icy Baltic waves slapping against reinforced hulls, the metallic tang of saltwater in the air, the distant rumble of engines echoing through the fog. Has Putin unwittingly handed NATO the keys to a vast sea fortress, turning his invasion into a masterclass in strategic blunders? Flashback, I remember the sting of frost on my skin during a quiet Baltic patrol years ago, the burn of cold metal on my hands, the diesel stench mixing with salty mist, as old rivalries simmered unnoticed. That world feels so distant now, reshaped by Putin's reckless gamble. Why has Russia's leader allowed this domino effect? Sweden's territory isn't just land, it's a deterrence powerhouse. As quoted from USNI News, an expert declared, Sweden's most important contribution to NATO will be its territory for deterrence and defense purposes. It can serve as an enabler, a basing and staging area for allied forces. Sweden can prevent Russia's ability to shape the regional environment for a potential conflict and repel Russian invasion. The Baltic Sea isn't merely a body of water, it's a sprawling 145,000 square mile arena where NATO's presence pulses with newfound strength. Despite bold claims, NATO doesn't control every inch. Yet. With Sweden and Finland's additions, alliances can surge their collective might. Bad news for Putin, triggered solely by his Ukrainian misadventure. But this boost to NATO doesn't stop at borderlines. In June, as per BBC reports, all NATO members pledged to hike defense spending to 5% of their gross domestic products by 2035. Pressure mounted from U.S. President Donald Trump, who insisted non-U.S. allies must contribute more justly. Again, Putin's Ukraine blunders ignited this transformation. His war aimed to erode NATO's European grip. Instead, it forged an iron pact with fresh members, escalated funding, amplified Ukraine aid, revealed by RBCU on November 3, and unveiled a drone fortification scheme. By mid-2026, NATO's eastern flank will bristle with drones, a counterforce against Russia's aerial swarm. These enhancements were unnecessary without Putin's hostile thrust. What terror grips the Kremlin seeing NATO emerge triumphant? The grind of defeat continues, with whispers of economic ruin lurking. Cliffhanger, as Russia's coffers empty and alliances solidify, will Putin face a nightmare of isolation and reversal? What undisclosed betrayal hides in his next desperate command? Imagine Russia's leader trapped in a web of his own making, drones buzzing like angry wasps over fortified borders, alliances hardening like frozen steel. His gamble backfired spectacularly, turning allies into foes stronger than ever. And now, amid this chaos, Putin clings to a desperate dream, victory as salvation. Did you know over 1 million Russian lives crushed into dust, economies shattered, yet Putin fantasizes a triumphant takeover will erase it all? What delusion drives this tyrant to believe conquering Ukraine will hand him a puppet state, tamed and compliant? Picture the heavy thud of boots on muddy trenches, the acrid stench of gunpowder clinging to sweat-soaked uniforms. Putin might think claiming Ukraine will reverse NATO's surge, negotiate sanctions away like flicking dirt off his sleeve. Win back frozen billions, rebuild an empire. The casualties? 1 million and counting, harsh toll, yes, but he'll add millions of Ukrainians, their vitality bolstering his sagging statistics. He's dead wrong, think of the cold slap of reality. Even triumph won't yield control, Dragon warns the BBC bluntly. No puppet regime like Belarus's submissive shadow. Putin fails miserably. He spins his special operation as liberation, rescuing Ukrainians from tyranny. Yet most despise him fiercely, smelling hypocrisy in every rallying cry. Hearts pounding resisting invaders, they dream of defiance, not surrender. Proof? August polls from the Kyiv Independent reveal stark truths. Would Ukrainians accept peace deals, NATO bans, ceding 4 occupied regions to Russia? A massive no, over 3/4 rejecting it. down from May's 82%, but iron will unchanged. No taste for Russian strings tugging their future. Dragon underscores this fury. Ukrainians fight savagely, underground currents of sabotage swirling like hidden rivers post-victory. Subterfuge in every shadow, and occupied land bleeding resistance into the conqueror's veins. How will Putin endure a nation of ghosts, hating his rule? Envision sabotage's sharp sting, underground whispers plotting chaos. His victory? A hollow crown atop smoldering ruins, where even triumph breeds eternal unrest. What monstrous twist awaits when occupation ignites rebellion's wildfire? The fight rages on, Putin's grip slipping through bloodied fingers. Will he awaken before the flames consume him entirely? Picture the cold shadows of command centers, where the air hangs heavy with the metallic tang of fear and the distant hum of distant machinery. In the shadows of Moscow's dark offices, Vladimir Putin clings to his nuclear bravado, waving it like a crumbling bluff card against the unbeatable hand of NATO. But does he truly grasp the storm he's unleashed, where even the ghosts of cancelled threats howl back louder than ever? Dragon's words echo like thunder in an endless downpour. Russia's nuclear edge? It's nothing but a mirage against NATO's unshakable fortress. Can Putin escape the web he's woven, or is the noose tightening with every reckless gamble? Now, building on that grim realization, recall how Dragon dismantled Putin's nuclear fantasies. He exposed the alliance's unmatched readiness. No, Russia isn't outmatched in sheer numbers alone. The United States wields access to 5,044 nuclear warheads through NATO. That's per the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. Russia claims just a tad more, around 5,500. Yet, the tiny gap? Filled by allies. France and the UK together muster 515 deadly warriors of their own. The Arms Control Association confirms it. And NATO's power? Unrelenting. They launch from land, sea, air. Their infrastructure sprawls like iron veins, pulsing with unstoppable might. Truly, it wouldn't need half these horrors to obliterate anything crossing them. That's the cruel beauty of mutual assured destruction, it always crushes both sides in a fiery grip. But Putin's blunder? He delusionally thinks he can threaten NATO credibly. He knows deep down they'd savage Russia just as brutally as Russia could ravage them. Threats that once cowed? Now, they only fan the flames of NATO's fury, born from this very war. Putin parades his new toys, unveiling nuclear nightmares. Dragon snaps back, NATO is a nuclear colossus. Putin, so accustomed to appeasement when he rattles Russia's doomsday saber, now faces blunt defiance. NATO has it all too. No retreat. No softening. Putin's bluff? Exposed and discarded. His only retort? More futile rattling, echoing through empty halls like a hollow drumbeat in defeat. Is this the bitter root of Russia's doom in Ukraine, even if they refuse to see it? Yes, it haunts every move. Sure, Russia might still claw for all of Ukraine. But at what cost in time? More agonizing years stretch ahead. In October, Reuters unveiled the bleak crawl. At Russia's snail pace, they'll snatch just 1% of Ukraine's vast lands by year's end. Add to the 19% already gripped in their cold claws, and Putin barely scrapes 20% total in 4 grinding years. Can you feel the cold dread creeping in, the seismic toll on flesh and spirit? Yet, 80% remains, a vast, unyielding void mocking his crumbling empire. Suffering piles on suffering. Moscow's economy sags like a battered ship in stormy seas, its once booming war footing crumbling under sanctions' relentless weight. Companies flee in hordes, over 460 abandoned Russia, leaving gaping holes. Frozen reserves? $340 billion trapped in ice. Energy losses soar beyond $78.5 billion after 3 torture-filled years. Growth sputters, just 1% in the first 9 months of 2025, plummeting from 2024's heights. By 2026, forecasts whisper even bleaker, 1.2% crawl. Putin dreamed of swift conquest, 2 weeks, he boasted in 2014. Reality? For savage years and counting, with no end in sight. Dragon's truth bites deep, it demands talks, halting the senseless slaughter. But Putin? Barricaded in denial, refusing compromise. U.S. intelligence reports scream it to NBC, no willingness to bend on peace terms. He digs in deeper, as soldiers bleed and rubles vanish. Why persist in this folly of stubbornness and misplaced faith? It's draining Russia's lifeblood, people, resources, all for a pipe dream. Even victory would shatter the nation for decades, weaker and hollowed out. And looming over this nuclear nightmare, a shocking twist emerges. What if Putin's threats, meant to divide, only forge NATO's unyielding bond? Can Russia survive the alliance's awakening, or is extinction's icy breath already at their door? The weight of those 5,559 warheads feels like a lead shroud, pressing down, suffocating hopes. One misstep, and annihilation whispers in the wind. Are we witnessing the birth of a new era, where Putin's gamble births his deepest fear? Stay tuned, as the battlefield evolves into a nuclear standoff. What will Putin unveil next in his desperate charade? The stakes rise, the air thickens with tension, destiny hangs by a thread. Amidst the chaos of war, an unsettling question emerges: what happens when a leader's ambitions collide with the harsh realities of failure? As the conflict in Ukraine persists with Vladimir Putin's forces relentlessly pushing against a determined defense, the cost of this aggression mounts steeply. The human toll, hidden beneath the rubble, reveals a staggering loss: over 1.14 million Russian troops killed, injured, or captured since the start of the invasion. Though Russia has occupied a fraction of Ukraine's land, the aggressive intent is only masking a profound strategic blunder. Russia's advances appear paltry. At the current pace, it will take nearly a decade to secure even 20% of the territory. In the meantime, Putin remains oblivious to the storm brewing beneath him. His country is bleeding soldiers and resources, all while NATO grows stronger and more united in response to his actions. What began as a supposed strategic operation has spiraled into a downward spiral of attrition, one that Putin is ill-equipped to navigate. In November, a NATO admiral named Giuseppe Carvo Dragone remarked on this stalemate. "The war has become a waste of lives," he stated, highlighting not just the human cost but a dire operational crisis for Russia. The illusion of an unstoppable military has been shattered, revealing vulnerabilities on every front, from air defenses to ground equipment. Russia has lost around 428 planes, 346 helicopters, and over 11,300 tanks, vast swathes of its military might, decimated beneath Ukraine's resilient strikes. Yet the repercussions extend beyond the battlefield. As the conflict rages on, Putin's economy falters under the weight of immense sanctions, leaving $340 billion frozen and significant losses in its energy sector. The outlook is dim, with projections indicating economic growth may plummet to just 1% over the next years. The ambitious dreams of empire expansion have devolved into a nightmare of financial despair and military humiliation. The irony? Even if Russia were to claim victory in this drawn-out struggle, the cost incurred would leave its power severely diminished. The hearts of the Ukrainian people remain unyielding, their resolve to resist any form of oppression from Moscow remains steadfast. The once iron grip of Russia is slipping as the puppet regimes it erected begin to crumble under the strain of their leaders' failed ambitions. Take, for instance, Venezuela, once a strong ally, now an echo of Russia's faltering influence. As America tightens its grip in the region, ships swarm the waters, asserting power that casts a long shadow over Caracas. Fear grips the heart of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, prompting him to reach out to Putin for support, knowing that his nation's stability is at the edge of a knife, teetering precariously under U.S. scrutiny. Putin's ambitions have ignited a firestorm that has drawn together breaking alliances and invigorated adversaries. With a world watching closely, will he continue to push forward, unaware that he is spiraling deeper into an abyss of despair? As military and economic tides shift, it becomes a race against time for both Russia and Ukraine, a battle for survival where one leader's stubbornness might just seal his fate. What will be left of a country that aims for dominance but finds itself scrambling to maintain what little it still holds? In the rumored shadows of a failing empire, Vladimir Putin's grip on Ukraine only tightens Russia's descent into ruin. As NATO Admiral Giuseppe Carvo Dragone warns, the war drags on, wasting lives and draining resources, with no victory in sight. But now, as despair spreads, Putin turns his gaze elsewhere. Desperate to shore up allies, he aims his influence at a troubled nation far from Europe's bleeding borders. Could a cargo plane carrying unknown burdens be the key to Russia's twisted rebirth in Latin America? Venezuela sweats under mounting U.S. heat, with naval vessels massing and threats echoing against cartel ships. Fearing total collapse, President Nicolas Maduro panics, begging for any lifeline. He's turned to Putin, pleading for radars, repair gear, and missiles. Putin's response? He dispatches an Il-76 cargo jet to Caracas, laden with secrets that could hand him control. Imagine the roar of engines slicing through humid air, the stench of jet fuel mingling with tropical heat as the plane touches down. What dark leverage does Putin seek in this forsaken corner of the world? By arming a terrified leader, he dreams of a puppet on strings, extending Moscow's reach. The plane rumples the runway, its hold possibly crammed with small arms, gear, or worse, mercenaries from the shadowy Wagner group. Pauses linger as whispers of frogmen and guns float, the tactile grip of crates whispers of alliances forged in blood. Is Maduro's bargain a suicide pact, trading sovereignty for survival? This move fits Putin's playbook perfectly, exploiting desperation to build an empire. Jay from Keypoints unveils it in a video. Maduro's so cornered, he'll grant Putin anything, perhaps even Venezuelan gold reserves shielded in Russian shadows or oil company shifts for more control. The jet's impact? A chill breath of occupation on Venezuelan soil. But what's inside truly haunts. Defense News reports the Il-76's capacity for 50 tons or 200 souls, perfect for smuggling troops or hired killers. India's DD News connects the dots, these planes linked to Wagner operatives, with mud-stained boots possibly stepping onto Caracas tarmac. Sensory echoes of distant gunfire resound, the metallic tang of munitions sharp in the air. Could these mercenaries enforce Putin's will, turning Venezuela into a staging ground? The twist stuns. Putin's Ukrainian quagmire births global ambitions, bleeding Russia dry while he gambles anew. Is this extension or entrapment, as America watches, ready to strike? As the plane's hum fades, will Maduro awaken to his chains, or is it already too late, the chirp of drones replacing distant thunder, the prickling dread of a new frontier claimed? Yet, amid whispers of expansion, cracks appear. Putin's obsession creates weaknesses, inviting reprisals that could shatter his fragile throne. Will Venezuela become his lifeline or his undoing, as unseen forces coil tighter? The air thickens with betrayals unrevealed, and one question burns: how far will this desperate dance drag them both into madness? In the previous segment, we uncovered how Vladimir Putin maneuvered Venezuela into a dire position, by dispatching Wagner mercenaries to seize gold stockpiles and seize control, leaving President Maduro in a desperate scramble for survival. Can you imagine the stench of panic in Caracas, where the air reeks of diesel fumes and political rot, and Venezuelan leaders clutch their phones like lifelines, begging a Russian dictator for aid? Now, what if I told you Putin's reckless gambits abroad are igniting a firestorm that could consume his own crumbling empire? Picture plane after plane touching down in Caracas, laden with crates that rattle ominously, weapons clinking like chains against the tarmac, while Maduro hands over millions to Putin as payment. Those Wagner goons snatched up $150 million from Venezuela's central bank reserves, a single, brutal heist that empties vaults with the cold echo of slamming doors. The Venezuelan state oil company relocated its European headquarters to Russia, handing Putin iron-fisted control over crucial assets. Is this strength, or sheer, suicidal desperation? Maduro's gamble reeks of folly, driving gasoline prices to a staggering $70 per gallon for his people. Feel the burn of that injustice: the world's largest proven oil reserves, an estimated 303 billion barrels, squandered in a crisis that no nation with such wealth should endure, yet here it is, fueled by Maduro's cowardice against cartels, and Putin's hunger to stretch Russian grip across Latin America. But pause here. Are we witnessing an empire expanding, or spiraling into self-inflicted doom? On the surface, everything screams typical Russian maneuvers, influence peddled like contraband in the dead of night. Yet beneath, Putin's Venezuelan meddling masks a fatal misstep. He provokes the very superpower he gambled would stay silent during his Ukraine invasion. The stench of hypocrisy lingers, burning alliances in Venezuela, while Ukraine skies thunder with retaliation. Jakey points out the ironies deeper. 2 massive plane loads of weapons delivered in a week to Maduro spell disaster. A first plane already landed, revealing Putin's double-edged strategy. It enrages President Trump, whose fingers hover over Tomahawk launchers like a coiled spring, and you can almost feel the electric tension in the air, sirens wailing in distant maneuvers off Venezuela's coast. Why risk such fury? As Jakey says, Putin might be clueless about the fallout, or plainly suicidal, pushing his chess pieces into the jaws of American wrath just as Trump ramps up Ukraine support, far more than any prior point in his second term. We began with those warnings earlier. Will this spark a global conflagration Putin's own making, leaving his empire charred and trembling? The conflict in Ukraine shows no signs of resolution, despite the toll it has taken on Russian lives. Vladimir Putin's relentless orders to his forces have resulted in thousands of casualties each month, yet he remains unaware that he is leading Russia into a deeper quagmire, one that is already a strategic defeat. Russia's initial goals have faltered, leading to significant consequences both domestically and internationally. Admiral Giuseppe Carvo Dragone, chair of NATO's military committee, delivered a stark assessment of Russia's situation. During a discussion with the BBC, he stated that the operational state of the war is incredibly stagnant, calling out the senseless loss of life. Putin's original plan to exhaust Ukraine has backfired spectacularly, ensnaring Russia in an ever-deepening mire of its own making. The grim statistics reveal the truth: more than 1.14 million Russian military personnel have been killed, injured, or captured since the beginning of the invasion. In addition, the destruction of approximately 11,300 tanks, over 34,250 armored vehicles, and a significant number of aircraft has been reported, leaving Russia's military machine in shambles. On the aerial operations front, Russia has suffered around 1,200 anti-aircraft units, nearly 428 planes, and 346 helicopters rendered ineffective. The devastating loss of over 77,860 unmanned aerial vehicles compounds their woes. This conflict not only devastates military capabilities but also drains Russia's economy. The financial strain is staggering. With over $340 billion in frozen reserves and approximately $78.5 billion lost in the energy sector after 3 years of fighting. Amid these figures, Russian families are faced with a harsh new reality. Death payments and military wages once seemed beneficial, but the increasing number of casualties breeds fear rather than pride. While the implications of the war are catastrophic for Russia, they extend beyond Ukraine. The invasion has inadvertently fortified NATO, which was one of Putin's primary objectives to disrupt. Sweden and Finland have joined the alliance, bolstering NATO's defenses and altering the strategic dynamics in the Baltic Sea region. Sweden, with its extensive history of submarine operations in these waters, poses a new threat to Russian naval capabilities, as NATO can now patrol critical areas near major Russian ports. The ripple effects continue as NATO members unanimously agreed to ramp up defense spending to 5% of GDP by 2035, ensuring a robust military presence. The Ukraine war has not weakened NATO; instead, it has galvanized an alliance, prompting increased funding, more comprehensive support for Ukraine, and innovative strategies to counter Russian threats. In reiterating the precarious situation, what began as a swift military operation has devolved into a far-reaching struggle, one that can only culminate in negotiations. Yet the barrier to these talks lies in Putin's inability to yield. With the cost of war eclipsing any projected benefits, Putin's stubborn stance risks further depletion of his nation's resources and influence on the global stage. The tragic reality is not just the loss of lives, but the very soul of a nation unraveling. As tension escalates, one must ponder whether the true cost of this war will be felt for generations to come. In a stunning turn of events, what is Vladimir Putin doing that mirrors a desperate man waving his fist at an armed opponent? This shocking parallel reveals how Russia's fading power is crumbling its puppet empire, leaving it begging on bended knee amidst echoes of past failures in Syria and beyond. Ruling from the shadows, Putin has embarked on this reckless maneuver in South America, sending whatever outdated weapons he deems useless for the grinding Ukraine conflict. He's scraping the bottom of the barrel to aid Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. But will it suffice? It's impossible to believe it could. Venezuela isn't poised for battle with the United States, even bolstered by Putin's flimsy support. Crete, the image of a once mighty ruler reduced to a clownish gesture, his face twisted in impotent rage, the stench of desperation hanging thick in the air like stale smoke from a forgotten fire. This outdated weaponry, what kind of pathetic farce is he staging? A withered leaf blown about by winds it can't control, crunching underfoot with every misplaced step. Yet, this folly evokes haunting memories of Syria, a land soaked in the salty sweat of betrayal and the acrid scent of gunpowder that clings to everything. Russia has propped up Syria much like it now fumbles with Venezuela, long before Putin seized power. The Soviet Union became Syria's primary military lifeline in the 1950s, that bond tightening through turbulent 2000s, as both nations bristled against American influence. Russia sustained the Assad regime during the 2010s, amassing another marionette on its strings. Funneling vast sums in armaments, far exceeding what's trickled to Venezuela. But quantity proved futile in the end. In late 2024, Assad's grip shattered like brittle glass beneath a hammer's blow, costing Putin a vital Middle East anchor. Now, Russia stoops to shelling out $23 million, per Wall Street Journal insights, merely to cling to its military outposts there. The tactile chill of defeat seeps into every handshake, every deal brokered in dim, dusty rooms. Putin forfeited Syria, despite lavishing the Assad faction with more backing than Maduro receives now. Russia's self-inflicted wounds in Ukraine fueled Syria's collapse, just under a year ago. Russia grows ever frilier as Putin scrambles for a firmer Venezuelan foothold, even as it slips through his fingers like fine sand. Take a moment. Can a leader blinded by nostalgia reclaim what fate has snatched? The gritty texture of fading hope abrades the soul, leaving scars that sting with each failed grab. Syria slipping away, Putin pivots frantically to Iran, as J and Kiwi detail. Russia is straining to channel weapons there as best it can, a far cry from the effortless dominance of yore. Again, this is Putin chasing influence he's ill-prepared for. Once, flooding Iran with arms would grant him sway over a client state. But now, with Iran wielding Shahed drones crucial to Ukraine's defense, it's less command, more repayment, a bitter transaction drenched in the sour taste of dependence. Imagine the humiliation, the leader once feared now tabling favors, his voice cracking under the weight of unspoken debts. What twisted irony unfolds next as Putin's empire teeters on this thin ledge? Will his desperate bets in Iran ignite a fire he can't douse, or is the final crumble just a heartbeat away? The air thickens with uncertainty, every whisper of wind hinting at irrevocable downfall. The conflict in Ukraine rages on with no clear end in sight. Vladimir Putin relentlessly sends waves of Russian soldiers against Ukraine's embodying defenses, each month accumulating a painful toll of casualties. Thousands of troops perish, their lives viewed as expendable in a war already perceived as lost by many experts. This catastrophic strategy has not only devastated Ukraine but is driving Russia deeper into a strategic void, leading to unprecedented ramifications both at home and abroad. Admiral Giuseppe Carvo Dragone of NATO clearly articulated this disarray, urging the need for dialogue due to the toll the war takes on lives. The attritional tactics employed by Putin, initially designed to exhaust Ukraine, have instead ensnared Russia in a quagmire of its own making. The evidence is stark. According to Ukraine's Ministry of Finance, over 1.14 million Russian troops have been killed, injured, or captured since the onset of the invasion. Furthermore, the grim tally of destroyed military assets is staggering. More than 11,300 tanks and around 34,250 armored vehicles have been either obliterated or rendered obsolete. A similar dismal picture emerges in the sky where Russia's once formidable air defenses are collapsing. With the loss of over 1,200 anti-aircraft units, 428 aircraft, and a shocking 77,860 drones, the military's capacity to maneuver has eroded, leaving the Russian forces vulnerable to strikes within their territory. The war's cost in human lives and material resources bears a heavy economic burden. Financial strains are monumental, with sanctions freezing $340 billion in reserves, translating into a staggering loss of $78.5 billion in the energy sector alone. In an ironic twist, the very war that Putin sought to strengthen Russia's global standing has bolstered NATO instead, with Sweden and Finland joining the alliance in direct response to his aggression. This expansion turns the Baltic Sea into a strategic fortress for NATO forces, ensuring tighter defenses against a historically regarded foe. What was anticipated as easy dominion has transformed into a decade-long struggle, with NATO member nations increasing their defense investments. As NATO prepares new strategies, rousing a drone force to counter Russia's drone challenges, Putin's isolation becomes increasingly palpable. His inability to admit defeat has positioned him in a precarious situation, clinging to power in a nation where the populace grows weary of continuous loss. But perhaps the most alarming aspect of this situation is how the tides are shifting. In the past, Russia wielded influence over regional players like Belarus, using them as pawns to project strength. However, this once reliable ally now seems as precarious as the rest of Russia's strategies. With President Alexander Lukashenko serving as a puppet ruler, Russia has stationed missiles within Belarus, supposedly to curb threats. Yet, insiders hint at internal turmoil, suggesting that all is not well in this Russian satellite. The question remains, will Putin recognize the impending reality before it's too late? How many more young lives will be sacrificed to sustain a faltering regime? The looming specter of defeat hangs heavy over Moscow. And the internal discontent threatens to boil over. In a game marked by high stakes and even higher losses, the true cost of Putin's dreams of dominance could soon manifest in an even more formidable challenge within his own borders. The tension ratchets up. What will be the next move in this deadly chess game? In a world shaken by warfare and ambition, the conflict in Ukraine exposes cracks not only in the battlefield but within the very fabric of the Russian-led alliance. Vladimir Putin, despite his iron grip, stands at the precipice of losing not just a war, but his influence over nations that once relied on him for support. As the war drags on, Putin continues to send troops to their doom, oblivious to the catastrophic toll on his forces. Reports indicate that over 1 million Russian soldiers have fallen, killed, injured, or captured. The equipment losses are staggering, more than 11,300 tanks and around 34,250 armored vehicles lay in ruins. And yet, Putin persists, shackling Russia to a strategy that has unwound his vision of swift conquest. NATO Admiral Giuseppe Carvo Dragone boldly asserts that it's time for dialogue, as the cost of lives continues to escalate in this unsustainable conflict. How much longer can he ignore the reality closing in around him? Inside Russia, a troubling phenomenon known as deathnomics has emerged. This term, coined by economist Vladislav Inozemtsev, refers to an artificial middle class that profits off the war. As families encourage their loved ones to join the fray for promises of monetary gain, a grim reality is setting in. With every loss, spirits crumble, replaced by an overwhelming grief that cannot be drowned out by financial incentives. The lure of easy money is fading as death tolls rise. The air grows heavy with despair, and the echoes of suffering seep into the hearts of those who remain. But the turmoil within Russia extends beyond shattered morale. The war's costs have plunged the economy into chaos, with staggering sanctions freezing approximately $340 billion. A haunting reality emerges: growth has slowed to a crawl, with forecasts predicting a mere 1% increase this coming year. How did a conflict deemed straightforward morph into a quagmire that drags down the whole nation? Turning the spotlight outward, Putin's ambitions have backfired. Once intent on limiting NATO's expansion, his aggression has instead fortified it, with Finland and Sweden joining the alliance as a direct response to his actions. This unintended consequence only bolsters NATO's foothold in the region, strengthening defenses near Russia's borders. The very structure he anticipated undermining is now rallying to counter his threats. Can Putin recover the influence he once wielded, or has he inadvertently forged a formidable opposition? In Belarus, puppet leader Alexander Lukashenko finds himself entrapped by the consequences of Putin's decisions. With rising discontent and fears for his regime's stability, he's signaling to the West in an effort to distance himself from the chaos that Russia has wrought. As he attempts to navigate these treacherous waters, is he acknowledging the strength of his former ally is waning? The once solid ground beneath Belarus is crumbling, pushing Lukashenko to seek a safer path, one that may lead him perilously close to betrayal. The corridors of power are filled with eerily quiet whispers of desperation and uncertainty. The empire Putin envisioned is unraveling, crisis after crisis revealing how precarious his grip has become. With conflict spilling into the very heart of his alliances, can he still hold on to the dreams of grandeur he once so confidently pursued? The once unwavering facade of control is cracking, and in the shadows of war, the true battle for power unfolds. The conflict in Ukraine continues with no end in sight. The brutal reality is that Vladimir Putin is sending wave after wave of Russian soldiers to face Ukraine's defenses, leading to thousands of casualties each month. The tragic irony is that while Putin believes he can solidify his grip on his perceived empire, he's only plunging his country deeper into disaster, a war that is slipping from his grasp. The staggering toll of this conflict is revealed by Giuseppe Carvo Dragone, chairman of NATO's military committee since January 2025. In a recent conversation with the BBC, Dragone bluntly stated that the war has bogged down to a point where dialogue is essential. He described Putin's strategy of attrition as backfiring spectacularly. Instead of exhausting Ukraine, Russian forces find themselves shackled by their own miscalculations, caught in a quagmire of immense human and material losses. Ukraine's Ministry of Finance reports that since the invasion began, over 1.14 million Russian troops have been killed, injured, or captured. The machinery of war suffers similarly, over 11,300 tanks have been lost, with about 34,250 armored vehicles damaged or destroyed. The air assault has not fared better, 1,200 anti-aircraft units are in ruins, and a staggering number of planes, helicopters, and drones litter the battlefield. In short, every day that passes sees Russia bleed strength and resources. This disaster isn't merely a military issue, it's crippling Russia's economy as well. The war has carried a financial burden that Putin never anticipated. Sanctions have frozen approximately $340 billion in Russian reserves, and costs have spiraled into the trillions. Despite lofty ambitions, Russia's economic growth is stagnating. Projections show a dramatic slowdown in growth estimates for the coming years. But the failures don't end there. As Ukraine repels assaults, the consequences are rippling through nations once compliant to Russia. Allies like Belarus are showing signs of strain. As we previously noted, even staunch supporters are feeling the pressure of this unraveling empire. Across the globe, nations aligned with Putin, Venezuela, Syria, and Iran, are reconsidering their partnerships as Russia's influence crumbles. The swift, bold strikes by Ukraine have severely disrupted Russia's oil refineries, 21 of which have been struck repeatedly. Russia is now facing severe fuel shortages, forcing it to bolster imports from Belarus. As Lukashenko contemplates his alliance with an increasingly vulnerable partner, questions about Russia's ability to sustain its ambitions loom large. Ukraine's long-range strikes are devastating. The Kyiv Independent states that these assaults have cost Russia about 4% of its GDP, roughly $74.1 billion. Consequentially, the weakening of Russia's military power is mirrored by its dwindling economic strength. Putin's initial dreams of a quick takeover and straightforward conquest have transformed into a protracted struggle, now stretching into the years. He remains steadfast, seemingly blind to the dire consequences of his decisions. As Dragone observes, the urgency for negotiations grows. Yet Putin clings desperately to his agenda. This stubbornness risks not only his leadership but the very foundation of Russian statehood in the long term. The question remains, how much longer can Putin sustain this facade of control as the walls of his empire close in? As the conflict deepens, the true cost of Putin's ambitions is revealed, both domestically and globally, raising anticipatory fears of what could come next. Summary of the previous part. In the ongoing struggle between Ukraine and Russia, recent reports indicate that Ukraine's long-range strikes have severely impacted Russia's economy, costing it a staggering 4% of its GDP, equivalent to about $74.1 billion. With these losses mounting, the Kremlin's grip on its empire and its military capabilities weakens as Ukraine intensifies its assaults. New text: Imagine an empire on the brink of collapse. Russia, once a formidable force, now finds its financial and military strengths dwindling under the relentless pressure of Ukraine's innovative warfare. August, September, and October saw a surge in Ukrainian strikes, targeting critical energy infrastructure in Moscow itself. The sound of explosions now echoes through the city, a stark reminder of the vulnerability that has gripped the heart of Putin's regime. As each wave of strikes takes aim at Ukraine's energy grid, 6 major substations have been devastated. With every targeted hit, the stability of Russia's energy system crumbles further. The question looms, how can a puppet master maintain control when he cannot even protect his capital? Those who once rallied behind Putin's banner begin to question the efficacy of their leader in this time of upheaval. Leaders of allied regimes, like Maduro in Venezuela, watch with increasing anxiety. While they plead for support, Putin's overwhelming challenges at home and in the battlefield render him unable to extend the aid he once effortlessly provided. His ambitions of empire-building drift further from reach, snatched away by the audacity of Ukraine's resilience. Yet, in the shadow of war, rather than seeking a path to peace, Putin's attention turns inward. In a desperate move to assert control, he targets dissent among his own people. On October 29, a group of street musicians, whose anti-government songs gained notoriety, found themselves arrested, an absurd distraction amidst a crumbling empire. How low has he stooped? Unable to threaten his enemies abroad, the Russian president now resorts to silencing voices that speak against him, while the weight of his empire crumbles. Each day passes, revealing that the invasion of Ukraine has not fortified his power but rather spiraled Russia closer to its downfall. As the ground beneath him shakes with the footsteps of troops lost and fortunes spent, will Putin heed the writing on the wall, or will he persist in his delusion until the very end? The tension hangs thick in the air, leaving audiences to ponder the true cost of stubborn ambition in the face of overwhelming change. As we saw in the last part, Vladimir Putin sinks to new lows in his frantic bid to cling to his crumbling empire. He fails to intimidate the West. He can no longer support his puppet regimes. Yet, he silences a few rebellious musicians off the streets. What shocking secret weapon has Ukraine unleashed now to shatter Russia's grip on the war? A drone that strikes fear deep into the heart of Putin's defenses, covering blind spots and turning the battlefield into a nightmare of chaos and ruin. Picture this. Puppet regimes crumble like sand castles under waves, exposing Putin's desperate reality. He's done. Russia thinks it's clawing back ground in the endless grind. But Ukraine counters with dazzling innovation. Asymmetric warfare pulses with Ukraine's genius, bleeding Russia's soldiers, tanks, and supply chains dry. Feel the thunder of explosions rocking enemy lines, the acrid stench of burning fuel drifting through air thick with dust and blood, fingers gripping triggers slick with sweat. November hits hard. Ukraine deploys a deadly marvel, sowing panic behind Russia's front. This mid-range terror erodes defenses Ukraine couldn't touch before. The FP2 drone arrives, courtesy of Firepoint's brilliance. The same creators behind the Flamingo missile, now slamming Russia with brute force. Flamingo delivers heavier blasts than past long-range drones. FP2 mirrors that firepower, yet dives into forbidden areas beyond the fray. Sensory overload, whirring rotors slice the air, cold metal payloads humming with menace, vibrations rippling as targets disintegrate. Specs reveal horror. One FP2 hauls a payload up to 105 kilograms, about 231 pounds. 10 to 20 times heftier than typical first-person view FPVs. Not just tanks or vehicles crumble now. Logistics hubs, supply forts, and troop staging grounds explode. Russia's shadowy command centers quiver. Imagine the crackle of imploding bunkers, the sharp tang of scorched earth biting your nostrils, boots squelching through mud mixed with debris. What unexpected twist flips the script? Russia races drones into the fray too, but Ukraine counters with missiles that dwarf them. The Yak-38 and Yak-141, mere relics against this storm. Putin's empire frays, his soldiers vanishing in plumes of smoke. Yet, the FP2's range? About 200 kilometers, roughly 124 miles. Ukraine's options explode. No more shackled to short-range toys. Dive deep, strike hard. Logistical veins severed, army starved, morale shattering like glass underfoot. Rhetorical question lingers, is Putin blind to the carnage he ignites, forcing his nation into a bottomless pit? The stench of defeat wafts stronger now, as Ukraine's shadows lengthen, and Russia braces for the next unseen blow. What dark revelation awaits when Ukraine targets even deeper? The war's tide turns viciously, leaving Putin gasping in the void. Can you believe Russia's unstoppable aggression has backfired so spectacularly? Over 1.14 million Russian troops killed, injured, or captured, billions in economic ruin, and now Ukraine escalates with advanced drones turning the tide. Is Putin's iron grip finally crumbling under the weight of his own mistakes? Continuing from the devastating toll on Russian forces and economy, where thousands die monthly in a quagmire of Putin's making, dragging his nation into financial abyss with $340 billion in frozen reserves and a slowdown to 1% growth. Ukraine's new tech advantage strikes fear deeper. Imagine the acrid stench of burning fuel from sabotaged depots, the distant rumble of explosions echoing across battle lines as robots deliver precision terror. Why does this drone make Russia's so-called safe havens tremble? Firepoint's EFFP-2 unleashes possibilities Ukraine craved, stretching 200 kilometers, about 124 miles, far beyond short-range FPV drones, shattering combat fronts and piercing deep into enemy territory once thought untouchable. What was supposed to protect Russian troops now begs mercy. How did this marvel evolve? It swapped the FP-1's 1,200-kilometer reach for mid-range havoc, packing a heavier warhead in exchange, giving Ukraine layered attacks, long-range missiles for Russia proper, EFFP-2 for strategic strikes, and FPV for frontline surveillance. Russian lines quiver at this multi-tiered menace, capable of targeting any weak point. Sensory terror mounts, the sharp crack of ordnance detonating before dawn, oily smoke curling from hit depots in the crisp air. Fingertips tingling on launch controls as operators guide fate remotely. This isn't just warfare, it's psychological siege. But what twists make it even more lethal? Two variants emerge, one autonomous, self-guiding to stationary bases with just coordinates programmed, like a ghost predicting doom. The other, manual via radio link, lets pilots steer onto moving trucks or evade electronic threats, rivaling FPV agility for dynamic hunts. Russia sweats, fearing invisible predators closing in. Building on Ukraine's drone arsenal expanding frontline domination, where EFFP-2 hits logistics hubs with metallic bangs and flaming destruction, forcing supply chains to ignite chaotically, options multiply dangerously. Why standardize chaos? The EFFP-2 mirrors FP-1 architecture, exploiting mass production know-how. No drastic retooling needed. Firepoint shifts seamlessly, scaling output fast. Ukraine benefits immensely, terrible for Russia. As battlefields saturate with these machines, hidden in truck convoys, bringing portable terror assembly right to the fray, what unseen edges await in this drone warfare escalation? The energy hum of drones launching screams escalation. Greasy residues on soldier boots from sabotaged sites add a gritty reality. Will Putin's stubbornness let more Russian lives evaporate, or force negotiations soon? Fishermen along beaches feel distant aftershocks, a grim reminder of Poland's plight. Is Russia's naval presence now a paper tiger, exposed to Nordic patrols? Imagine the sleek EFFP-2 soaring like a silent predator, its wings cutting through the chill night air. Unleashing havoc that Russia can't counter. We've seen NATO swell with Sweden and Finland, strengthening Baltic defenses and forcing Russia's hand to the negotiating table despite Putin's defiance. But Ukraine's drone innovation intensifies the agony, humiliating Russia further. Tracing back to Ukraine striking deeper with medium-range strikes, transforming once secure Russian positions into flaming liabilities, this ensemble of variants delivers customizable carnage. What makes one variant a stationary target's nightmare? Autonomous guidance locks on coordinates alone, slashing static depots without human intervention, the sizzle of circuits planning the perfect blast. For the second, radio-linked control turns it into a living weapon, operators twitching joysticks to weave onto armored hulls or punch through jamming fog, the heartbeat-pounding thrill of remote domination. Sensations amplify, vibrations on the ground from warhead impacts rattling teeth, metallic tang of spilled fuel choking the senses, tense breaths held as drones evade counters in the smoky warscape. Russia's command posts panic, their fortified illusions crumbling. Why the near-identical design to FP-1 fuels this frenzy? Standardization turbocharges production, letting Firepoint churn EFFP-2 units rapidly without reinventing the wheel. Ukraine's offensive deepens, a stacked siege that's militarily genius. But as mobile truck-like setups hide in plain sight, assembling drones on the move. Evolving from Ukraine's growing supremacy. Where EFFP-2 erodes Russia's logistic lifelines with thunderous precision and rising fuel shortages, questions linger. How long until this drone cascade bulldozes Putin's ego, exposing fatal blunders in plain view? The icy wind carries whispers of inevitable talks, as Russian dreams of conquest freeze over. Is this the twist where Ukraine's creativity outmatches Russia's brute force, turning invasion into annihilation? Touch the cool metal of a spent casing, feel the war's raw pulse. What horror next plagues Moscow's bravado? In a clash that seems to stretch endlessly, the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine has turned into a nightmare for both nations. Vladimir Putin, seemingly oblivious to the devastation he's caused, is driving his troops headlong into a futile battle, where the lives of thousands of Russian soldiers are being sacrificed each month. Ironically, while he believes he's asserting strength, the reality is that his country is sinking deeper into a conflict that it cannot win. A stark warning was issued by NATO Admiral Giuseppe Carvo Dragone, who noted that the war's operations have become so convoluted that the time for negotiation seems inevitable as both sides waste precious resources. Putin's aggressive strategy, aimed at gradually debilitating Ukraine, has completely backfired. Instead, it is Russia that finds itself ensnared in its own trap. Let's take a closer look at the staggering statistics. Over 1.14 million Russian troops have been either killed, injured, or captured since the onset of the invasion. Shockingly, Russia has lost more than 11,300 tanks and approximately 34,250 armored vehicles to date. This isn't merely a tally of equipment, it's an alarming indicator of a military draining its life force. As weapons crash and explosions sound across the battlefield, Russia's air power crumbles too, with approximately 1,200 anti-aircraft units destroyed along with hundreds of aircraft and helicopters. Yet this conflict is more than just a military struggle, it's pushing Russia into an economic abyss. A financial analysis suggests that Putin's misguided war efforts have resulted in frozen reserves amounting to a staggering $340 billion, alongside crippling losses in energy sectors. In fact, projected economic growth is expected to stall at just 1% for 2025, a grim reality for a nation that once thrived under better circumstances. While domestic implications weigh heavily on Russia, the consequences have also reshaped the global stage. NATO has emerged stronger than ever from the ashes of conflict that Putin sought to exploit. Sweden and Finland's entry into NATO represents a strategic blunder on the part of the Russian leader, as these nations bolster defenses that were previously vulnerable. With these new alliances, NATO is enhancing its strategic posture in the Baltic Sea, a critical area for both economic and defense reasons. As NATO mobilizes additional resources, the shadow of past miscalculations looms large over Russia's future. But what's the ultimate twist in this tale? The very drones Ukraine is deploying, innovative, cost-effective machines that can execute operations at a fraction of the cost of traditional weaponry, are inflicting enormous economic damage on Russia. A drone can cost as little as $400, yet their impact is devastating. Operations like the recent Spiderweb, where inexpensive drones rained down havoc on Russian airbases, resulted in billions of dollars of destruction, crippling a significant portion of Russia's strategic bomber fleet. Putin may expect to assert dominance, but he's inadvertently birthed a situation where Ukraine's resilience is matched by its ingenuity. The very financial strains that threaten to derail Ukraine's resources become the weapons that Russia can't afford to overlook or ignore. In a world where innovation meets desperation, the once mighty bear finds itself entangled in a web of its own making. How much longer can this scenario play out before the conflict's repercussions become irreversible? The battle rages on, and with every drone that takes to the skies, the balance of power shifts in unpredictable ways. What does the future hold for a nation that seems unwilling to adapt? Can you even grasp the horror of drones humming like angered wasps, mere hundreds of dollars each, launched from dusty cargo containers, blasting billions in ruin across Russian lines? Feel the acrid smoke stinging your nostrils, the ground trembling under targeted detonations, as a foreign power's shadow, imagine China's massive fleets looming, threatens to unleash even deadlier replicas on Putin's crumbling empire. This nightmarish tide of cheap warfare swells, turning Ukraine's ingenuity into Russia's fiscal bleeding heart. Russia's mighty foes lurk on tomorrow's horizon, those with pockets deeper than ocean trenches. But today? Ukraine wields death from the skies at bargain prices. Imagine sleek FP2 drones, buzzing silently, precision-guided nightmares slicing through the air, each costing mere thousands to build. One strike from that unassuming cargo box echoes forever. It humiliates Putin's grand delusions, forcing his coffers to hemorrhage millions, billions, while he clings to delusions of victory. Does he tremble at the sting of economic death, the way soldiers feel grenade shrapnel tearing flesh? Putin's reckless war machine devours everything, hundreds of billions squandered on his so-called special operation, pushing Russia's weary economy right to the abyss. Picture the weight of that burden, like iron chains dragging a nation under murky waters. In September, Russia's economic development minister Maxim Reshetnikov warned the course of decline. How can Russia sustain this mad pace? His words rang out like a ghostly echo in St. Petersburg's conference halls, business sentiment screams recession's brink. Curled fists and furrowed brows betray the truth, as families huddle in stale kitchens, smelling the rot of inflationary decay. Yet Putin spins lies to mask the corpse of his regime. He claims that pathetic 1% GDP growth slump into 2025, after soaring past 4% in 2024, is all by design. What farce! What bitter deceit to justify this madness draining Russia's lifeblood. Ukraine seizes the edge, though. Her FP2s swoop like vengeful eagles, obliterating prized Russian assets at a fraction of their cost. Touch the shattered metal, feel the grease-smeared ruin, its war's tactile cruelty embodied. Russia, sprinting toward self-inflicted disaster, may soon find wallets too empty to rebuild. And oh, this beast strikes under full moon's glow or noon sun's glare, equally murderous, equally unstoppable. That's the spark setting wildfire chaos behind Putin's crumbling front lines. Beyond flashy specs, FP2 proves lethal in battles forged. On November 2, United 24 media echoed the thunder. SBU unleashed a barrage of FP2 assaults deep in occupied Ukrainian zones, slipping past combat veils to strike true. Targets quiver, but as Russia scrambles, alliances tighten, whispering horrors yet to erupt. What if this drone terror metastasizes, crashing oceans apart? Will Putin's pride crumple before the gathering storm? The skies darken, engines roar silently closer, destruction hangs by a fraying thread. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine seems to stretch endlessly as Vladimir Putin continues to send more Russian soldiers into a battle that appears increasingly hopeless. Each month, countless lives are lost at the behest of a leader seemingly blind to the futility of his choices. Russia's ambitions to dominate Ukraine are rapidly unraveling, showcasing a disastrous strategic defeat for Putin and dire consequences for his nation. NATO Admiral Giuseppe Carvo Dragone paints a grim picture of Russia's plight. Speaking to the BBC, he declared that the war has become a quagmire, drowning both sides in suffering, with the cost in lives becoming unbearable. What was once a strategic plan for a swift victory has backfired tremendously, leaving Russian forces stuck in a mire of their own making. Data backs Dragone's assertions. Vast troop and equipment losses plague Russia month after month. Over 1.14 million Russian soldiers have been either killed, injured, or captured, while military hardware tallying over 11,300 destroyed or damaged tanks shows the staggering toll of this misguided war. The air war for Russia is equally dismal. With anti-aircraft units in ruins and losses including 428 planes and 346 helicopters, Russia's aerial capabilities are crumbling. A staggering 77,860 drones have been incapacitated to Ukraine's defenses. While much of the world hears the muffled sound of conflict, the reality is an unrelenting cascade of military setbacks for Russia, leading to a financial drain of epic proportions. The pangs of war are now echoing through the halls of the Kremlin, where Russia's economy, paralyzed by sanctions, faces monumental losses, including around $340 billion in frozen reserves. While desperation mounts for Putin, the strategic miscalculations made in this campaign present even larger implications beyond Ukraine. NATO finds itself fortified, an outcome entirely opposite of what Putin aimed for. Sweden and Finland's entry into NATO sends shivers through Russian ranks rather than solidifying their power. This military alliance grows stronger by the day. Further complicating matters for Moscow, NATO is boosting defense budgets and sharpened strategies, including a drone initiative for its eastern flank. But what if there's a twist to this tale, a hidden factor that only heightens the stakes? As the war rages on, reports reveal that Ukraine's new FP2 drones are changing the dynamics of warfare. Capable and efficient, these drones strike with alarming precision. Footage released by Ukraine's SBU showcases targeted strikes hitting critical logistical facilities behind Russian lines, spreading chaos and confusion. This newfound capability not only devastates Russian supply lines but also exposes a growing vulnerability. These strikes on November 3 symbolize a cognitive shift in warfare strategy. Rather than confronting Russia head-on with brute force, Ukraine is smartly dismantling the very support systems powering the Russian military, an approach turning the tide in their favor. Now, troops left without adequate supplies become easy prey for Ukraine's aggressive drone tactics. As chaos unfolds, one can only ponder, could this unexpected maneuvering be the key to reversing fortunes on the battlefield? In the throes of tragedy, remains the shocking reality, Russia is not just bleeding soldiers but is locked into a conflict that seems to deepen each day. As Putin stands firm on his orders, others pay the price, the scale of loss grows, and with it, the momentum shifts toward Ukraine as it deftly maneuvers through an evolving battlefield, creating a narrative filled with surprises and resilience amid despair. Imagine the mind-numbing terror of Russian soldiers, deprived of fuel and supplies, their boots heavy with mud from relentless marches. Blast waves rattling bones, acrid smoke choking the air. Is Ukraine's drone campaign turning the tide in a way Putin never saw coming? From the rear, Ukraine strikes. Ukraine's layered drone assault hits hard. Soldiers march with empty tanks. No fuel here. Echoes of distant engines fade. Ukraine's FP2S target supply lines first. Then, armed FPVs attack weakened troops. War press reports a strike deep in Donetsk Oblast. About 150 kilometers from the front. 93 miles away. Ukraine's long-range reach causes havoc. Smell the scorched earth after each hit. Feel the ground tremor. Russia's pain intensifies. Is this the end for Putin's advances? Pulling back, Ukraine's strikes penetrate Russia's rear defenses. But the pattern repeats with even deadlier precision. Footage from November 3 shows new horrors. Drones hover over Luhansk suburbs. 90 kilometers from combat zones. 56 miles in. Images captured by Ukraine's eyes in the sky. Approaching targets. Direct hits scored. No fiery blasts on video this time. Recon drones absent, perhaps. Yet, proof lies in the FP2's view. Silence broken only by whirring propellers. Touch the cold metal of destroyed vehicles. What unseen devastation hides in the dark? Russia trembles as Ukraine unleashes FP2S cheap tech at $55,000 wreaks untold damage. But hold on, Ukraine adapts beyond drones. Constant innovation counters Russian tactics. Gamification sparks a thrill in 2026. The Guardian reveals it on November 3. Ukraine's system, started in 2024, turns war into a game. Drone operators earn points for kills. Trade them for better hardware. Echoes of victories fuel the fight. Heart-pounding adrenaline as operators reload. Will this gaming twist shatter Russia's lines forever? Imagine waking up in a shattered bunker, the acrid stench of smoke clinging to your uniform, as the distant hum of drones echoes like angry hornets in the night. Ukraine's drone warriors aren't just fighting, they're leveling up in what feels like a twisted video game. And Russia's army? It's bleeding out, 1 point at a time. What's the real price when soldiers turn war into a score, and 18,000 of your enemy's troops vanish in a single month? Back in our last tale, set in 2026, we uncovered how Ukraine revolutionized its drone battles with gamification. On November 3, The Guardian revealed a video game-style reward system for operators, launched in 2024. Soldiers rack up points to snatch drones and gear from an online marketplace called Brave One, boasting over 100 options in drones and autonomous machines. More teams joined, boosting the count from 95 units in August to 400. This twisted incentive drove them to crush 18,000 Russian soldiers in September, killing or wounding them as if playing a deadly Call of Duty mission. Now, picture this, Russia's sprawling fields littered with twisted metal, the sharp tang of gunpowder and diesel fuel lingering in the air. Ukraine's gaming approach for drone pilots isn't just a quirk, it's a brutal edge that turns exhaustion into relentless hunting. Operators unlock better gear, their fingers dancing across controls like gamers grinding for loot. Is this how modern warfare evolves, blending adrenaline and rewards? Or is it a grim veil over the horror of lives erased? The numbers speak volumes. In 1 month, those players painted battlefields red. Questioning if Putin's forces stand a chance against such inventive fury. Drones swarm like relentless swarms of bees, their high-pitched whirs slicing through fog-laden mornings. You feel the ground tremble under your boots as explosions ripple nearby, a constant reminder of looming threats. Ukraine layers its defenses with these mechanical beasts, stacking aerial barriers that mirror a digital fortress in a real-world duel. No longer can Russia sneak past Ukraine's lines without facing a cascade of countermeasures. Ukraine's top commander, Oleksandr Syrsky, spelled it out bluntly. On Facebook, he urged building tiers of interceptors, cannon fodder drones halting enemy Shaheeds and kamikaze threats. Crews train, radars hum with life, and strike systems per ready. Drones fight drones in a skyward ballet, weaving webs of destruction. What if this multi-layer net snags Russian assaults mid-flight? The tactile buzz of controls and soldiers' hands hints at what's brewing. When Russia advances, does it flee Ukraine's drone gauntlet unscathed? Or get shredded by FPV beasts? If these defenses sink with the FP2 and dive-bombing FPVs, Russia's peril spikes. Imagine troops behind front lines assaulted by low-flying terrorists, FP2s in the hind, spelling doom for morale and maneuvers. On the edges, FPV drones shred infantry like shrapnel tearing flesh, sounds of screams mingling with mechanical roars. Advances fizzle under layered intercepts, where one drone collapses triggers another in a domino of aerial carnage. Is there no sanctuary for Putin's surging masses, trapped in a whirl of buzzing menace? Picture the earth shaking, fires licking the horizon. What twisted genius will Russia conjure to counter this buzzing onslaught? As dawn creeps in, casting long shadows over cratered earth, a horizon blares with enemy signals. Is Russia on the brink of total aerial capitulation, or will a shadow maneuver turn the skies anew? The tension coils tighter than a spring in the muzzle. Will the next twist shatter alliances or ignite an inferno beyond imagination? In a world where the shadows of war loom large, a tale of revenge and cunning unfolds. Vladimir Putin's Federal Security Service, known as the FSB, is a formidable force steeped in fear and influence. Yet, it fell prey to a masterful ruse crafted by Andrei, a Ukrainian double agent whose audacity would lead to a stunning humiliation for the agency. This gripping story reads like a cinematic thriller, with real stakes and shocking twists. Here's how Andrei turned the tables against one of the most feared intelligence agencies in existence. Years before the conflict ignited, Andrei thrived as a businessman on the Crimean Peninsula, running a successful hotel and making quite a fortune. However, fate dealt him a cruel hand when Russia invaded Crimea in 2014 and seized his hotel. Just when he thought recovery was possible, the onset of a full-scale invasion in 2022 saw Russian soldiers ransack his new business, leaving him contemplating his next steps amidst a wave of despair and resentment. His dreams of vengeance simmered beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to ignite. Andrei stayed connected with Ukrainian security forces, ready to assist if an opportunity arose. That moment arrived when FSB agents were dispatched to sabotage administrative buildings in his city. Recognizing a chance to strike back, Andrei teamed up with operatives from the SBU, devising a plan to ensnare these covert operatives. Would their trap succeed, allowing them to capture the very agents threatening their lives? As Andrei delved deeper into the intricate web woven by the FSB, he learned how they operated. Discovering advertisements targeting desperate men for recruitment. The urgency of this moment transformed his desire for retribution into a tactical mission. If Ukraine's multi-layered defenses could synchronize with advanced drones, Russia could find itself ensnared in an insurmountable predicament. The drones would not just observe but decimate Russian strategies from behind enemy lines. Imagine those chilling evenings when the hum of drones filled the air, signaling Ukraine's fierce resolve. Andrei's plan was set to the rhythm of that chilling ambience. The stakes could not be higher. Now or never, he thought, as the balance of power shifted. Was this unwitting trap the crescendo in a game of shadows orchestrated since the first invasion? Stay tuned as the groundwork for an unexpected confrontation unfolds, promising a future filled with dramatic turns and unforeseen revelations. In the heart of a war-torn city, the stakes couldn't be higher. Waves of desperation crashed through the streets as the conflict spiraled out of control, leaving families in turmoil. Amidst the chaos, one man felt a surge of determination emerge from the ashes of despair. André, a resourceful soul caught between loyalty to his homeland and the relentless grip of the enemy, saw a glimmer of hope. Could he turn the tides of battle by infiltrating the enemy's ranks? Recognizing the dire need for a countermeasure against the encroaching Russian forces, André forged a plan to outsmart their spies. He united with the Security Service of Ukraine, creating snares designed to ensnare FSB agents. Yet, there was more to his mission than mere subterfuge. His eyes were set on a network of agents lurking behind a facade of social media ads, a web of manipulation targeting vulnerable men seeking a way out. As André combed through these platforms, a chilling realization struck him: the ads weren't just bait, they were traps laid for flawed minds, whispering promises of power through vandalism. He deciphered their strategy: mundane tasks like spray painting symbols of hate, each small step luring men deeper into treachery. But André wasn't interested in painting walls, he aimed for the heart of the beast. Using his charm and history in negotiations, he sidestepped the lowly tasks. Instead, he directly contacted FSB operatives, pretending to scorn the trivial jobs he was being offered. With a quick twist of words, he convinced them he was ready for greater challenges, and slowly, their trust in him began to solidify. Eventually, he reached the zenith of his deception. They assigned him the most dangerous task yet: create an explosive device for an explosion that would shake the foundations of an administrative building. But deception dripped through his fingertips. André had no intentions of shedding blood or damaging the innocent. With instructions in hand, he set out to gather components under the watchful eye of an unsuspecting FSB handler. As he strolled through the market, the scents of spices and roasted meats hung in the air, a stark contrast to the turmoil around him. Quietly, he executed the plan that simmered under a facade of compliance. He collected ingredients not for destruction but for a greater purpose: to construct a fake bomb, disguised with pristine precision to mislead the enemy. Time ticked, and tension coiled tighter like a spring. Would his ruse lure in a real agent? As the framework of his trap took shape, André couldn't shake the feeling that the smallest misstep could unravel everything. His heart raced with both fear and adrenaline. His hands, meticulous and steady, crafted a vessel for the truth he'd soon reveal. Intrigue hung thick in the air. Would his endeavor to protect his homeland pay off, or would it place his life in peril? In a chilling silence, he prepared for the next phase of his audacious scheme. The stage was set, and all that remained was the ticking heartbeat of fate. Imagine a world where one man's iron grip on power spirals into catastrophic defeat, dragging his nation into an abyss of blood and bankruptcy. That's the chilling reality of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, where Vladimir Putin, blinded by hubris, sacrifices his troops like pawns in a losing chess game. Month after month, thousands of Russian soldiers vanish into the meat grinder of war, their bodies fuel for a conflict that's bled Russia dry. Over 1.14 million troops killed, injured, or captured, countless tanks and vehicles shattered into twisted metal, planes, helicopters, and drones plummeting from the skies. Yet Putin clings to delusions, turning the battlefield into a quagmire that weakens Russia economically and strategically, empowering NATO, freezing billions in assets, and forcing an exodus of companies. Sweden and Finland now fortify the alliance's northern defenses, turning the Baltic Sea into a fortress against Moscow's reach. Billions in sanctions crush Russia's economy, growth slowing to a crawl, while Ukraine strikes deep, igniting fires in oil refineries that choke the air with acrid smoke and send fuel prices soaring. It's not just defeat, it's humiliation, as Putin's stubbornness breeds fear in his own people, replacing wartime windfalls with grief and despair. And in the shadows of this epic failure, a double agent plots a twist that could flip the script. Did a brave Ukrainian double agent really outsmart Russian spies with a flour-filled fake bomb, humiliating their deadly plot into a comedic farce? Picture the crisp, salty scent of ball bearings in his hands. The metallic tang clinging to his fingers as he rigged the real device at a bustling market stall. André worked silently, his heart pounding a thunderous rhythm against his ribs, following the handler's whispers with mechanical precision under the watchful eye of a Russian special services officer who lurked like a shadow, breathing down his neck, ensuring no slip-ups in this lethal ballet. But what if I told you this so-called maestro was crafting not one bomb, but two, one loaded to kill, the other a harmless decoy stuffed with flour, identical in every inch to mock the invader's arrogance. The weight of each felt the same in Andrei's sweat-slick palms, the fine powder itching his skin like a cruel joke. Fear gripped him. The Russians could raid his home any time, uncovering the deception and painting him a traitor. Ukrainian police might swoop in, mistaking him for a true Kremlin puppet, their sirens wailing through the night. And worst, a corrupt checkpoint guard, eyes sharp as razors, could spot him and whisper to the FSB, turning Andrei into a discarded shell, useless in the war's grand tapestry. Would his SBU connections bail him out, or leave him rotting in silence? Fortunately, no betrayal struck. Andrei slunk through undetected, stashing both bombs in his dim, musty garage, the air thick with the earthy grit of hidden explosives. But twisting fate brought fresh terror, to lure the Russians into a trap for the SPU's ambush. How long could he dodge the knives before one slipped through? Andrei had just completed the first phase of his perilous mission, evading watchful eyes from enemies on both sides, securing his homemade explosives in the safety of his home. Then he hit a wall. His master plan? To set a snare for Russia's operatives, aiding Ukraine's security service in a daring capture. By making the bomb himself and hiding it at a spot instead of planting it directly, he avoided the risk. Another agent would grab the package, transporting it those final steps to the target. Sure enough, Andrei concealed the device. Imagine the heart-pounding fear of confronting a Kremlin loyalist willing to slaughter innocents for filthy lucre. Can one man's words undermine a machine of death? Picture the acrid stench of sweat-soaked rooms, the cold grip of fear clutching at Andrei's throat, as he risked everything to recruit a true Russian spy. But Andrei realized a trap couldn't spring with him as the sole player, crafting the explosive and placing it at the city's targeted site. He needed another paw in this deadly game, a genuine FSB asset devoted to Putin's regime, eager to maim or murder brothers in country for a fast bribe. Ahead loomed a massive hurdle. Convincing his FSB contact that he could assemble the device, yet lacked the guts for deployment. Relying once again on charm's razor edge, channeling his slick entrepreneur self, Andrei spun a tale compelling enough to rope in a third operative. The ordeal dragged on beyond a week. Intense meetings suffused with the metallic bite of tension, sweat pooling on brows. Hands trembling slightly on cups of stale tea. Andrei begged the officer to spare him the planting. He grasped the blast aimed to erase dozens in that administrative hub, yet claimed he recoiled from staining his hands crimson. Professing unwavering allegiance to Russia, showering praise on the Kremlin, he pleaded he craved a role in the grand scheme, minus crossing into murder's abyss. Why would a lowly handler shaped by horrors dare challenge such a behemoth? These enforcers epitomized cruelty, executing decrees through bloodbath, valuing nothing beyond robotic triumphs, unburdened by mercy's whisper. Few dared whisper dissent against these predators, fewer still escaped unscathed, without sparking doubt or shattering trust. Yet Andrei dared, and prevailed. He swayed that ironclad figure, altering the blueprint to add a fresh agent. The air shifted, a subtle crack in the facade, humiliation flickering in the handler's eyes as he bent to persuasion's will. But was this victory sweet, or laced with poison? Now, the operation morphed, unfolding in shadows Andrei orchestrated. What dark twist awaited as the new player entered the fray, poised to seal Russia's doom? Would Andrei's gambit expose the invaders, or unleash chaos beyond control? The plan pivoted unexpectedly, embracing a confederate to carry the load forward. And with that change, the noose tightened on Putin's web of spies. In the shadowed underbelly of this endless war, where Russian forces bled relentlessly against Ukrainian defenses, a startling twist unfolded. Could one man's cunning turn the tide of terror, humiliating Moscow spies in their own deadly game? The acrid scent of deceit hung in the air, mingling with the distant rumble of artillery. Tension coiled like a spring, ready to snap. Sirens wailed faintly from afar, their shrill cries echoing the fear-gripping ordinary lives. What if a harmless secret could crumble an empire's plot? Over 1.14 million Russian troops fell, casualties mounting in a futile grind. Yet, amidst this carnage, a quiet deception fermented, changing everything. Few envisioned such sabotage succeeding. Most would falter, arousing suspicions or shattering their handler's faith. Yet Andrei defied the odds. His voice steady, pulse quickening with each whispered plea, he swayed the FSB officer. Fingers trembling slightly as he typed urgent messages, Andrei secured another agent, reshaping their blueprint. No longer burdened with crafting the device himself, he merely concealed it in that hiding spot. Another pawn, a trustee drawn into the web, would retrieve and ferry it to its lethal destination. What hidden frailty exposed Russia's lethal arrogance? The warped metal groaned underfoot, a tactile reminder of unyielding battles. Skies boomed with drones droning hum, over 77,860 Russian UAVs crumbling to shrapnel-strewn earth, and so the stage was set, fraught with unseen perils. Uncertainty gripped Andrei's mind, his breath shallow in the chill night. He slipped the fake bomb, nothing but inert fillers, a mock-up of flour and staples, into its makeshift cache. Vibrations from passing vehicles rattled his nerves, hands slick with unseen sweat. Texting coordinates pulsed with danger, betraying nothing of the trap. Russians funneled intel to their unsuspecting tool, who arrived unsuspecting. Tension mounted, hearts pounding in the silent surveillance game. Could this foolproof ruse mask a catastrophic blunder? Over 11,300 tanks lay wrecked, their metal husks smoking under relentless skies. Echoes of explosions reverberated, the stench of scorched earth pervading every breath. Opponents' hubris crumbled under scrutiny, traces of previous dealings lingered like smoke. Andrei's gambit, persuading a FSB ally to alter plans, paved a flawless path. Now, the unwitting holder grasped the package, oblivious to its fraud. Believing explosives primed to massacre dozens roared in his grasp, he clutched a harmless vessel, a container veiled in deceit. Sharp, unyielding edges bit into palms, heightening the illusion of peril. Yet, ignorance shrouded his fate. From that first step at pickup, SBU eyes locked on, tracking every shadowed move. Winds carried faint whispers of pursuit, boots crunching gravel in unison. As he trailed orders to the building's threshold, meant for obliteration, did he sense the snare tightening? Fuel shortages agonized Russia, prices soaring amid roaring engine failures. Vibes of desperation hummed in barren streets, where economic woes pinched like thorns, layers of deceit uncovered deeper betrayals. Freed from bomb-making perils, Andrei vaulted the location to Handler's clutches. The dupe, lured by greed's siren call, hefted the tampering weight, certain of its deadly intent. Shadowy figures stalked him, footsteps muffled in damp fog. Sensory alarms blared, distant sirens hinting at doom, fabric rasping against skin in haste. Command obeyed, he marched to doom's edge. Agents struck like lightning, sealing his arrest in a whirlwind of capture. Humiliation for Moscow's minions lay bare. Could desperation's allure blind one to betrayal's fangs? A startling 1% growth tormented Russia's economy, collapsing from 2024's pace. Artillery's thunder drowned out cries, the metallic tang of fear-filled air. Unforeseen watchers poised for the final sting, whispers of prior captures echoed softly. Andrei's strategic shift, enlisting aid to revise tactics, unleashed the sting. Survivor trapped, his facade disintegrating under SBU's unyielding gaze. An unemployed soul from Chernobyl's ghostly reaches, he craved cash's allure above all. Telegram's siren ads lured him, promising riches and shadows. Initial trials, minor arson on railway veins, proved loyalty before ascending to terror's heights. Now, bars enclosed him, life's shadow looming plus seizures of ill-gotten gains. The trap's cold clarity shone, what phantom wealth lured a man to Russia's ruin? Economic sanctions froze $340 billion, losses bleeding from energy voids. Sensory overload, buzzing bees of concerned conversations, the bitter chill of uncertainty. What monstrous revelation awaited next in this web of espionage? In a world drenched in conflict, the war in Ukraine stretches on, with no end in sight. Russian forces continue to pour into the fray, seemingly unaware that their attempts to conquer Ukraine are plunging their country deeper into despair. Despite the staggering toll, thousands of Russian soldiers fallen every month, Vladimir Putin appears oblivious to the reality that his ambitions have already crumbled. The ramifications extend far beyond the battle-scarred lands of Ukraine, laying bare the strategic blunders that haunt Russia. Recent analyses from NATO's military chief, Admiral Giuseppe Carvo Dragone, suggest that the war has devolved into chaos, a quagmire that Russia can no longer control. The operational stalemate cries out for negotiation as the war transforms into a graveyard of wasted lives. It's a grim irony. An attritional strategy meant to wear down Ukraine has morphed into a cascading disaster for Russia itself, reducing it to an exhausted, weakened state. Statistics paint a stark picture. Since the invasion began, over 1.14 million Russian troops have either died, been injured, or captured. With every passing day, Russia's military inventory shrinks, including the losses of more than 11,300 tanks, along with countless armored vehicles and artillery systems. Audibly, the hum of broken machinery echoes through a landscape marred by destruction. As Russian planes and helicopters plummet from the skies, each crash reverberates with the reality of a faltering military. Approximately 1,200 anti-aircraft units lie in ruins, alongside 77,860 unmanned aerial vehicles lost to Ukraine's formidable defenses. How much longer can Russia sustain this cost? It's not just military might crumbling under the weight of failures, Russia's economy is gasping for breath too. Over $340 billion in frozen reserves due to international sanctions, coupled with staggering losses in the energy sector exceeding $78.5 billion, have left Russia's financial stability hanging by a thread. Major corporations have fled, markets are shrinking, and growth forecasts plummet. What was initially envisioned as a quick victory has transformed into a prolonged nightmare. Putin's misguided belief that he could subdue Ukraine in record time emerges as a tragic miscalculation. The echoes of his once confident declarations now haunt the halls of power, the sounds of a crumbling empire vibrating beneath the tension of ongoing conflict. As Admiral Dragon suggests, the imperative for negotiation grows stronger with each passing day. Yet, Putin's entrenched views stubbornly resist reality. The troubling notion that he remains oblivious to the true depths of his misjudgments keeps the door to diplomacy firmly shut. Meanwhile, a new threat looms, one sculpted from the ashes of Putin's strategic failures, the resurgence of NATO. In direct contrast to his ambitions, NATO has emerged fortified, bringing Finland and Sweden into the fold. As they join forces, bolstered by desires to counter Russia's aggression, the tables turn against the very narrative Putin sought to construct. Consider the Baltic Sea, once considered neutral territory, now transformed into an area of heightened NATO vigilance, ready to block any attempts of further Russian advancement. The formidable presence of Sweden's submarine expertise ushers in an era where NATO no longer just watches but acts, prepared to defend its members from potential Russian incursions. In this atmosphere thick with tension and defiance, one question arises: what if Putin's misguided war ultimately dooms his very legacy? The pain echoed through the lives lost and the landscapes ravaged whispers of a future where Russia remains weakened, overshadowed by an empowered coalition. As the cacophony of war continues and the fog of uncertainty swirls, the question lingers: how long can Putin's ambitions sustain a state on the brink of collapse? With every statistical revelation, a more chilling truth surfaces: Russia's mighty facade is crumbling, while NATO's strength solidifies with each day. The tension between these titans is palpable, and the outcome hangs tenuously in the balance. The ongoing Ukraine war drags on relentlessly, as Vladimir Putin pushes his troops into Ukraine's unyielding defenses. Thousands of Russian soldiers perish monthly under his command, yet Putin fails to grasp that he's dragging Russia deeper into a defeat he's already sealed. Russian aims crumbled, leaving strategic scars on the country both within and beyond Ukraine's borders. Today, we explore why Putin has lost this conflict, drawing from a NATO admiral's insights, brutal casualty figures, economic drains, and NATO's unexpected surge, all painting a dire picture for Russia. Can one man's stubbornness unravel an entire nation? Feel the chill of winter winds whipping through battlefields, the acrid stench of burning fuel mixing with the echo of distant explosions in your mind. Imagine the weight of metal crushing bones underfoot, the deafening roar of drones overhead casting flickering shadows on frost-cracked earth. Continuing from Russia's war bogging down into a grinding quagmire of its own ego, where attritional tactics backfired spectacularly, bleeding resources and lives, NATO Admiral Giuseppe Carvo Dragone warns it's time to talk, not slaughter. Why does Putin cling to a nightmare he's doomed to lose? Then, the numbers scream agony: over 1.14 million Russian troops killed, injured, or captured, bodies piling like forgotten debris in the snow. Over 11,300 tanks obliterated, 34,250 armored vehicles reduced to twisted husks, 66,500 cars and systems scrapped. In the skies, 1,200 anti-aircraft units shattered, 428 planes downed, 346 helicopters erased. 77,860 unmanned aerial vehicles swatted away like persistent flies. How many lives must crumble before the charade ends? Picture the rumble of artillery shaking the ground, vibrations traveling through your boots as mud clings to skin, the metallic tang of blood mingling with gunpowder smoke. Building on lives and machines evaporating in Ukraine's grip, this isn't mere stalemate, it's a hemorrhaging empire. Deathnomics, as coined by economist Vladislav Inozentsev, breeds a warped middle class profiting off war, families urging sons into firefights for death payments and wages, trading pride for terror. Too many deaths shatter that illusion, fear replacing comfort amid fuel shortages and soaring prices from Ukrainian strikes on oil refineries. What whispers of dread echo in Moscow homes? Sanctions freeze $340 billion in reserves, energy losses hit $78.5 billion, 460 companies flee, growth plummeters from 1%'s painfully slow crawl. Feel the cold fingers of economic decline tightening around your throat, the hiss of deflating hopes like a punctured tire on icy roads. From economic wounds festering like infected trenches, destiny shifts outward, NATO swelling stronger, Putin's nightmare inversion. Sweden and Finland join the fold, bolstering Baltic Sea defenses, turning neutral waters into formidable barriers. Can you hear the sonar ping slicing through underwater shadows, the slick feel of submarine hulls gliding silently? NATO pledges defense spending hikes to 5% of GDP by 2035, forging drone armies by mid-2026. Why did invasion spark alliance rebirth? Trump pressures echo. Yet Putin's blunder united them against him. Echoing NATO's empowering rise from Putin's miscalculations, the Kremlin spins webs of deceit in Ukraine's heart. Agents slither through towns and cities, targeting impoverished pockets where desperation breeds betrayal. For profit, they strike at their own. Feel the musty dampness of crumbling alleys, whispers of conspiracy rustling like dry leaves underfoot, drones lull hum a constant stalker vibration. This pernicious plan fabricates resistance illusions, recruits sparking arson, doping symbols, planting bombs, terrorism masked as civil strife to justify brutal incursions. Advancing from shadowy operatives sowing chaos for Russia's gain, this deceit aims to tarnish Ukraine's image, whispering hazards to Western allies, weaning support from Kyiv. Yet the world peers beyond, recognizing FSB fingerprints on these stunts. What's the real sting? Ukrainians like Andrei flipping the game, masquerading as agents, thwarting plots with cunning hearts. Fueled by love for homeland and family, scars from occupiers' injustices drive him, no coercion, just righteous fury against invaders threatening his world. Sense adrenaline's electric buzz, the tap of fingers on hidden comms like heartbeats in tense silence. In Andrei's bold exposure of FSB schemes, he unearths operational secrets, relaying vital intel to SBU counterparts, saving lives, foiling terrorists, confounding oppressors daily. Driven by patriotism's warm glow amid cold fears, he battles not from orders, but soul-deep resolve. Who else lurks, feeding raw intelligence into Ukraine's veins? Then, agents he encounters reveal distorted visions, drawing Nazi motifs by rivers untouched by footsteps, vigilant against ever-present drones' ominous buzz, sketching fantasies far from harsh reality. Will these misplaced illusions unravel sooner than Putin admits defeat? Feel the suspense coiling, threads of deception tangling tighter, perhaps Andrei's next revelation could shatter it all. In the battlefield of narratives, where truth and deception intertwine, a Ukrainian operative named Andrei is risking everything. He lives in fear, not just for himself, but for his family, as enemy forces have invaded their homeland. Yet, in his covert collaboration with the FSB, he uncovers secrets that could turn the tide against them. Andrei has learned the inner workings of this notorious agency, relaying critical intelligence to his contacts at the SBU. But there's a puzzling irony. The competence of some Russian agents contrasts sharply with their distorted perceptions of life in Ukraine. Imagine operatives suggesting ridiculous actions, like painting Nazi symbols beside a secluded river, territory left vacant, where only Russian drones cast ominous shadows above. Other requests, equally absurd, involve scouring local markets for explosive materials. It's as if these officers glean insights from low-budget thrillers or the propaganda offered by Russian television, rather than engaging with the stark realities of war. Yet, not every Ukrainian embodies courage and honor like Andrei. Among their ranks, some yield to the allure of collaboration with Russian forces, motivated by dire circumstances or twisted loyalties. These individuals might feel trapped by their bleak financial situations or drawn to the Kremlin's call, driven by familial ties or a reckless spirit that craves acts of rebellion. They become the pawns in a shadow war, easy targets for the FSB. But there's a silver lining. With Ukrainian intelligence's growing strength and the resolve of double agents like Andrei, the Kremlin's ambitions face increasing resistance. The struggle deepens. Can Ukraine's ingenuity in sabotage and espionage outpace the heavy hand of the Kremlin? Will the bravery of the few overshadow the betrayal of the many? In the depths of this chaos, the stakes continue to rise. Explore how Ukraine's strategic moves inside Russian territory are shifting the balance. Witness the resilience in their fight against a seemingly omnipotent foe, and discover what lies ahead in this ever-evolving conflict. The future remains uncertain, and only time will reveal who will emerge victorious in this grim theater of war. In the heart of an ongoing struggle, the conflict in Ukraine continues to unfold with chilling persistence. Vladimir Putin, in his relentless pursuit of control, has sent countless Russian soldiers to their deaths, all while remaining oblivious to the grave consequences of his decisions. As the war drags on, it becomes increasingly clear, Putin's ambitions are not only doomed but are dragging Russia into an abyss of loss and despair. Admiral Giuseppe Carvo Dragon of NATO has shed light on this grim reality. In a candid interview, he warned that the war has grown stagnant to the point where it may be time for talks. The toll on lives is staggering, and Putin's strategy, intended to wear down Ukraine, has backfired spectacularly. Instead of weakening its opponent, Russia finds itself ensnared in a quagmire of its own making. Recent statistics tell a harrowing story. Since the invasion began, over 1.14 million Russian troops have either been killed, injured, or captured. The once mighty Russian military is now bleeding resources, over 11,300 tanks and thousands of armored vehicles rendered useless. The conflict's aerial dimensions are equally dire. Nearly 1,200 anti-aircraft units are destroyed, along with over 400 planes and helicopters. Each figure flashes a warning sign: Russia's military might is dwindling. Simultaneously, the economic ramifications are wreaking havoc on Russian society. The financial burden of this conflict has culminated in a staggering estimated loss of $340 billion in frozen reserves due to international sanctions. Major companies have exited the market, forcing the economy into a steep decline. Despite Putin's belief that he could assert dominance in Ukraine, an endeavor he once believed achievable within weeks, years have turned the aspiration into a painful protraction. The invaluable insights from experts like Dragon reveal that Russia's military might is not only faltering but is also leading to an intensifying need for negotiation. Yet, there's an unexpected twist. The war has emboldened NATO, creating a formidable alliance that now includes Sweden and Finland. This expansion has transformed Northern Europe's defense landscape, enabling stronger patrols in strategic waterways critical to Russia. With increasing defense spending and new strategies being implemented by NATO, Russia finds itself at a disadvantage it never expected to face. The invasion intended to weaken NATO has done the opposite, cementing a united front against further Russian aggression. And while Putin's grip on power appears unyielding, cracks are beginning to form within his regime. Reports suggest a segment of Russian citizens, disillusioned and fearful, are questioning the war's costs. As bodies pile up and the economy continues to falter, the public's patience may just rupture, leading to unforeseen consequences. Can any of Putin's decisions be reversed, or are they irrevocably leading his nation toward destruction? The answers are not just political, they are a matter of survival for countless individuals on both sides of this conflict. Now, let's turn our attention to ordinary Ukrainians resisting oppression. Among them is Andrei, a double agent who dares to defy the Kremlin. Using his insider knowledge, he empowers his people while infiltrating enemy operations. He reflects on the absurdity of the Russian agents he encounters, who operate on twisted perceptions rather than reality. It's a poignant reminder of the broader struggle, a war not just for territory, but for truth and honor. And as darkness looms, Andrei's courageous deeds illuminate a path forward, revealing the true strength of those fighting injustice. His resolve could be the key to tipping the scales in this clash of giants, foreshadowing a reckoning that could shatter the Kremlin's ambitions entirely. Will the bravery of one man ignite a spark of rebellion against tyranny? Or will the shadows of despair extinguish the light of hope? The unfolding chapters of this saga remain fraught with peril, yet they offer glimpses of resilience and the indomitable human spirit fighting against tyranny. Can you imagine a whirring beast of metal and fury, dodging through enemy skies, raining deadly blasts on dug-in foes? That's the Firepoint FP2, a battlefield monster tearing Russia apart, and it's cheaper than a fancy car. But is this the game-changer that leaves Putin humiliated, watching his defenses crumble while Ukraine laughs? Shake off the drone's roar as it dives, the acrid stench of scorched earth clinging to your nostrils, the ground trembling under relentless explosions. Back to where we left off, Firepoint's sleek design bridging FP1's strengths has slid into mass production like a well-oiled machine, setting the stage for FP2's rapid rollout. Standardization from that base lets the company clone those efficiencies straight into this new model, speeding everything up without a hitch. Picture the thrill of ARM's engineers huddling over blueprints, coffee-stained desks, and the hum of printers spitting out plans, race to beat Russia's sluggish defenses. Fast forward to now, FP2 units are hitting the front lines, their wings slicing through smoke-filled air, each deployment a punch to the gut for Moscow's hopes. Why does Russia shiver every time Ukraine unleashes this FP2 killer? Because it's designed for brutal close-quarters brawls, not sniper shots across vast distances, smashing through fortifications with a ferocity that turns tables on the invaders. What started as Putin's grand conquest has spiraled into a nightmare of shattered tanks and fleeing troops, their boots crunching over debris, framed by the droning wail of incoming strikes that echo like a death knell. Writer Blackthorn, in his razor-sharp medium piece, spotlights these clever mobile launchers disguised as ordinary military trucks, jolting across battle-scarred roads. Ukraine's operators can roll right up to the edge of Russian hideouts, hearts pounding, unleashing the FP2 swarm in seconds, a tactical twist that humiliates Russia's sluggish responses, leaving their soldiers quaking in muddy trenches, the metallic tang of fear sweat mixing with gunpowder's bite. Mobility is key here, with the truck setups boosting that range, letting the drones punch deep into enemy lines before vanishing, evading counterfire in a dance of destruction. Feel the earth shudder as FP2 strikes erupt, flames licking the sky, erasing fortified positions that Russia's generals swore were untouchable. It's the perfect drone for Ukraine's moment, crashing in hard and fast against an occupier that's overstayed its welcome, and now facing the nightmare of a weapon that fits their desperate needs like a glove. Blackthorn nails it. While the FP1 roamed far into Russian territory, FP2 fills the gap for those piercing attacks on occupied soil, hitting where it hurts most, turning Kiev's defenses into a relentless offensive tide. Russia's paranoia spikes. Are they clinging to delusions, banking on this trophy drone being too pricey to deploy en masse? Oh, how wrong they are, tasting the bitter twist of underestimating their foe again. The FP2 isn't a budget buster, it's a steal, assembled for mere $55,000 each. Imagine the horror for Moscow, a missile's worth of havoc delivered per unit, yet at a fraction of that cost. Shattering their economic siege tactics with every launch. Ukraine's war machine grinds on, fueled by this bargain beast, but at what price to their own coffers? As the fighting drags, whispers of financial ruin echo louder. Could this be the tragic irony where victory demands bankruptcy, forcing a gut-wrenching 80% slash to military funds just to survive 2026? The sting of debt buries deeper, with responsible statecraft warning back in March that even peace might leave Kyiv destitute, budgets bled dry by endless struggles. But Russia's horror unfolds anew, with FP2 flooding fields, their dug-in troops taste true despair, explosions rattling bones, wind whipping ash and cries of retreat. Is this the endgame that breaks Putin, or just the start of more agony? Will Ukraine's skyborne warriors finally force that humiliating surrender, or expose a deeper chasm of self-inflicted pain? In a chilling twist of fate, the war in Ukraine has evolved into a catastrophic mire for Russia, a battlefield where Vladimir Putin's ambitions are meeting a devastating reality. As Russian forces continue to struggle against a resolute Ukraine, the startling truth emerges: thousands of soldiers are losing their lives each month, yet the Kremlin persists in its relentless campaign, oblivious to the reality that its grasp on victory is slipping away. The esteemed NATO admiral, Giuseppe Carvo Dragone, recently illuminated this desperate situation during an interview, revealing that the conflict has bogged down to the point where dialogue is a necessity to spare lives. His assessment underscores the paradox of Putin's strategy, where the intent to weaken Ukraine has backfired spectacularly, entangling Russia in a quagmire of its own making. Statistics tell a stark story. Data from Ukraine's Ministry of Finance indicates that between the invasion's onset and early November, over 1.14 million Russian troops have been either killed, injured, or captured. Concomitantly, over 11,300 tanks and a staggering 34,250 armored vehicles have met a similar fate, denoting a debilitating loss of military might. On the air front, Russia's aviation woes deepen with approximately 1,200 anti-aircraft systems in ruins, alongside the destruction of 428 aircraft and 346 helicopters. Each loss contributes not just to a military collapse but to an economic crisis that threatens Russia with dire long-term consequences. How did it come to this? The economic fallout has compounded the human toll. Sanctions have frozen approximately $340 billion in reserves, while the energy sector faces losses exceeding $78.5 billion. The ghost of an artificial growth, initially buoyed by a war-prepared economy, has morphed into a decline, Russia's economic prospects now dwindling faster than anyone could have predicted. The question lingers: will Putin ever acknowledge the depths of his perilous strategy? Observers warn of his stubbornness, a refusal to face the self-inflicted wounds that delineate his leadership. As NATO expands, drawing in Sweden and Finland, escalating defense spending across member nations, Putin's actions have ironically fortified the very alliance he aimed to weaken. But the unexpected doesn't stop there. The dire situation has prompted a grotesque desperation. The FSB, under Putin's regime, has resorted to recruiting operatives through brazen advertisements appealing for quick cash, urging individuals in war-torn Ukraine to commit heinous acts such as arsons on government buildings. They've crafted an insidious narrative, portraying these acts as patriotic, while luring the vulnerable with promises of up to $5,000 for participation, using cryptocurrencies to skirt detection. The Kremlin's chilling ambition is clear: to create chaos from within. As they leverage poverty against loyalty, one must ponder, how far will the pain go? With a regime entrenched in denial and manipulating the fragile fabric of society, the implications stretch far beyond the battlefield. The resilience of Ukraine stands firm, but on the other side, a nation grapples with an identity torn apart by conflict and human greed, teetering on the brink of self-destruction. In the heart of this madness, who really stands to lose? The answer may unravel the very future of Russia and its people. Can a nation recover its integrity amidst flames of betrayal, or is it destined to burn in the shadows of its own making? The battlefield dynamics between Russia and Ukraine continue to evolve, revealing a startling truth. While Vladimir Putin relentlessly orders his troops forward, he appears oblivious to the mounting losses and strategic blunders crippling his nation. Each passing month, countless Russian soldiers lose their lives in a conflict that seems increasingly futile. Yet, the harsh reality remains: Russia is ensnared in a war it cannot win, spiraling into a quagmire of its own making. An authoritative voice in NATO, Admiral Giuseppe Carvo Dragone, underscores this dire situation, suggesting it may be time for meaningful discussions. The protracted attritional strategy that Putin envisioned has instead backfired, leading Russia into a disastrous stalemate. The grim statistics paint a bleak picture: over 1.14 million Russian forces have been killed or incapacitated since the invasion began, and the loss of military equipment is staggering: over 11,300 tanks, 34,250 armored vehicles, and an alarming number of aircraft and drones. Yet, the devastation extends beyond the battlefield. Putin's miscalculations have compounded an economic crisis within Russia, marked by sanctions that freeze assets critical to the country's stability. Analysts estimate a staggering $340 billion is stuck in limbo due to international restrictions. The war, initially perceived by the Kremlin as a swift endeavor, has dragged on for years, disintegrating Russia's economy and forcing a reassessment of military readiness and national morale. At home, a fabricated middle class, born amidst the horrors of conflict, now finds itself confronted with rising casualties. Many families once regarded the fight with a sense of pride, emboldened by potential financial incentives. However, as the body count rises, this pride is replaced by an overwhelming sense of dread. The very fabric of Russian society is fraying as the war rages on, with hesitance circulating among those once eager to join the ranks. In an unexpected twist, Ukraine has harnessed the power of cutting-edge technology, deploying FP-2 drones to disrupt Russian strongholds deep behind enemy lines. These machines have transformed the battlefield, striking logistics hubs and supply chains vital to Russia's combat efforts. Footage released by Ukrainian forces showcases successful strikes, validating the operational readiness of these drones and adding a potent element to the unfolding conflict. Now, with NATO's fortifications escalating and new members joining the alliance, the strategic landscape for Russia grows ever bleaker. Sweden and Finland's accession to NATO has bolstered defenses in the Nordic region, much to Putin's dismay. The countermeasures being implemented ensure that NATO is increasingly prepared for any Russian aggression, illuminating the profound irony underlying Putin's ambition to weaken the alliance. As the storm clouds of war continue to gather, the story of this conflict is far from over. Each side grapples with loss and resilience, and the future remains uncertain. Will Putin recognize the truth of his strategic failures, or will the conflict consume Russia whole? The world watches, waiting for the next chapter in this grim narrative of war, loss, and the quest for power. Previously, we saw how Russia's failures in Ukraine have fueled nationwide resistance, leaving Putin with a hollow victory at best, a land devoid of control and a people rife with defiance. Imagine the bitter sting of defeat, masked by empty boasts. What shocking revelation turns Putin's so-called triumph into a nightmare of hidden warfare? Picture the air thick with whispers of sabotage, the ground trembling under covert acts of defiance, as shadow fighters slip through the night like phantoms born of unyielding hatred. Ukraine's outright refusal to bow sends a seismic shock through Putin's delusions. It exposes his grave error in assuming control is merely a matter of conquest. Even if Russian forces claim every inch, the heart of the nation remains untamed. Population steeped in resistance won't fuel Russia's struggling economy. Failure. Recent figures convey urgency. Over 1.14 million Russian military personnel have been lost through injuries or capture. Equally alarming, over 11,300 tanks lie destroyed, making it painfully clear that the invaders are succumbing to their own battlefield dilemmas. Meanwhile, Ukraine's resolve steadily intensifies. Despite the relentless losses on both sides, Russia's crippling attrition strategy comes at a steep financial price as well. An astonishing 77,860 unmanned aerial vehicles are no longer operational. This isn't merely a military defeat but an economic catastrophe for Russia. How much longer can a nation endure such relentless expenditure without breaking under pressure? With over $340 billion frozen in sanctions and massive losses in various sectors, Russia teeters on the brink of an economic abyss. As pride morphs into panic, the psychological grip warps even the most ardent supporters of Putin's vision. No longer is the war viewed through the lens of glory. Fear takes root within families that once hoped for financial uplift through military service. The desperation translates to grim choices, encouraging loved ones to join the ranks to avoid dire fates of unemployment and despair. Yet, as losses pile up, the battlefield's allure dulls, replaced by a surge of dread echoing in homes across Russia. With recent aerial assaults reaching into Russian territory, the consequence of a rigid refusal to negotiate becomes stark. Ukraine's counterattacks organizing strikes on energy infrastructure exemplify not only determination but growing capabilities. Have Russian leaders underestimated Ukraine's resilience, allowing them to retaliate with marked effectiveness? It appears they are awakening to a looming crisis, adjusting strategies no longer merely to defend but to counterattack. And as the conflict rages on, NATO finds newfound strength in unexpected alliances. Sweden and Finland's accession confirms the irony of Putin's ambitions, an ever-expanding NATO that strengthens responses to threats. Instead of disbanding, NATO gasps for breath and emerges closer than ever, ready to proportion resources for the challenges ahead, including new drones aimed at Russia's evolving tactics. Can Putin's original aspirations to undermine this alliance withstand such a decisive turn? The narrative of control shifts dramatically as the fabric of Europe reshapes under the weight of conflict. Dragon reflects on the profound implications of today's maneuvers. The tensions that ripple throughout NATO serve as crucial lessons. Each act by Russia encourages unity among European partners. But with the specter of nuclear threats looming, do these revelations come at an unyielding cost? Awareness burgeons within NATO. Alongside a potent military presence, a strategy emerges to bolster defenses. Ultimately, Putin's gambit may herald a significantly more fortified NATO. Yet, as dialogue remains elusive, the war transforms into a relentless cycle of retaliation, with one fundamental truth unfurling: no matter the eventual outcome, the very landscape of European security has been irrevocably altered. Will Putin recognize the need for compromise, or will he continue to drive Russia deeper into peril? As questions linger, the future hangs in a delicate balance, waiting for a decisive shift. In an escalating conflict with profound repercussions, the war in Ukraine shows no sign of conclusion. Every month, Vladimir Putin directs his troops to assault Ukraine's defenses, resulting in staggering losses. It's not just a battle of soldiers but a costly endeavor for Russia, as thousands perish under the weight of decisions made by their leader. While Putin believes he is forging ahead, the realization dawns that he has pushed Russia into a quagmire of his own making, one they're unlikely to escape. Amidst these battlefield losses, NATO Admiral Giuseppe Carvo Dragone shared a stark assessment: Russia is trapped in a futile struggle. The prolonged conflict has morphed into a draining stalemate, a reality that has led Dragone to advocate for urgent negotiations to salvage remaining lives. Instead of wearing Ukraine down, Putin's strategy has backfired, leading his country into a self-made pit of devastation. The statistics are sobering: over 1.14 million Russian troops have either fallen or been captured since the war began, while over 11,300 tanks lie twisted and unrecognizable on the battleground. The aerial front presents no different tale of misfortune. Significant losses continue to mount, including 428 military aircraft and around 1,200 anti-aircraft units reduced to scraps. Each piece of equipment taken down not only symbolizes a fraying military might but drinks deeply from Russia's financial reserves. An unprecedented economic burden is also acutely felt. Sanctions have frozen approximately $340 billion in reserves, coupled with staggering losses in the energy sector amounting to $78.5 billion. This reality complicates matters further, as thousands die while machinery designed for defense crumbles. The mood within Russia shifts ominously as families once proud of sending their sons to battle now grapple with loss and fear. A disturbing trend emerges: many are enticed by the financial allure of war compensation, but the price tag grows heavier with each casualty. With troop numbers dwindling and Ukraine striking back by penetrating Russian territory, the ramifications of Putin's decisions echo loudly. The dire data reflects not only dwindling military power but a nation paralyzed by the cost of war, straining for an exit. Putin's aspirations to bolster Russian influence in Venezuela reflect yet another layer of desperation. On October 27, he re-signed a strategic agreement, fabricated back in May, attempting to paint the illusion of strength. Yet the reality is stark: the US isn't intimidated anymore. Russia's feeble attempts to supply arms, which pass through various nations, indicate a sheer lack of sophistication and effectiveness. Each shipment symbolizes a feeble grip on power, one that grows slacker as global confidence in Russia wanes. In a world where strength is imperative, Putin's maneuvers spell disaster. His ambition to reclaim a realm of power seems to unravel further, leaving him grasping at shadows. Underneath it all lies a haunting question: how did this once mighty leader find himself cornered, with every move revealing the cracks in his once formidable facade? The echoes of a crumbling empire resonate more than ever, as each strategic blunder leads Putin toward his undeniable end. Previously, we saw how Russia's failures in Ukraine have fueled nationwide resistance, leaving Putin with a hollow victory at best, a land devoid of control and a people rife with defiance. Imagine the bitter sting of defeat, masked by empty boasts. What shocking revelation turns Putin's so-called triumph into a nightmare of hidden warfare? Picture the air thick with whispers of sabotage, the ground trembling under covert acts of defiance, as shadow fighters slip through the night like phantoms born of unyielding hatred. Ukraine's outright refusal to bow sends a seismic shock through Putin's delusions. It exposes his grave error in assuming control is merely a matter of conquest. Even if Russian forces claim every inch, the heart of the nation remains untamed. Population steeped in resistance won't fuel Russia's struggling economy. Failure. Recent figures convey urgency. Over 1.14 million Russian military personnel have waves. Subterfuge brews in dark alleys, the acrid smell of burning sabotage curling in the air. Underground networks pulse with life, their operatives hands firm on hidden weapons. Putin presides over chaos, a leader trapped in a quagmire of his own making. Yet, this blunder deepens. His conviction that Ukraine craves Russian rule is shattered by the nation's fierce rejection. Which superpower alliance stands ready to amplify Ukraine's stand, turning the tide against Putin's nuclear bravado? NATO's European partners, arms outstretched, bow to persist. They've learned the harsh lesson. Giuseppe Carvo Dragone, chair of NATO's military committee, shared with the BBC, everything we've witnessed serves as a stark reminder. Europe awakens, realizing Russia demands vigilance. NATO fortifies itself, adopting a bolder stance against looming threats. This aggression extends to Putin's nuclear gambit. Ukraine and its allies face whispers of apocalypse. On October 31, BBC unveiled Russia's menacing unveilings, a duo of nuclear horrors designed to cow opponents. First, the Poseidon, an underwater monstrosity unveiled in 2018. It glides at up to 120 miles per hour, zigzagging unpredictably. Claims of infallibility echo, yet the world questions. In an age of supersonic silos and hypersonic streaks, can this slow mover truly evade capture? The touch of ocean spray hides deadly intent, waves slapping against an unstoppable menace. Then, the Burevestnik, a nuclear-powered cruise missile with promised endless reach. Accuracy remains enigmatic, shrouded in propaganda. Putin waves these tools like a bully's fist. But twist, these threats humiliate him. NATO counters effortlessly. We are not intimidated, Dragone declares to the BBC. Our alliance stands prepared to shield 32 nations and over 1 billion souls. As a nuclear powerhouse, NATO mirrors and exceeds. With 5,044 warheads per the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, the US shares the load. Russia boasts around 5,500, a slight edge covered by allies like the UK and France. Putin's arsenal? A desperate bluff in a game he's losing badly. The sting of realization bites deep. Has Putin finally outmaneuvered himself into irrelevance, his once feared might crumbling before united defenses? In the midst of a seemingly never-ending conflict, a shadow looms over Russia as it struggles to maintain its grip on Ukraine. Vladimir Putin's orders have resulted in waves of Russian soldiers crashing hopelessly against Ukraine's defenses. Each month, the toll rises, thousands of lives lost, all for a war Putin appears to have long since lost. Surprisingly, he remains determined to drag his nation deeper into a quagmire from which there seems to be no escape. A concerned NATO admiral, Giuseppe Carvo Dragone, has pointed out the grim reality: Russia's military strategy has backfired spectacularly. What should have been a swift operation has devolved into a tragic stalemate, costing more lives than anyone could have predicted. As Dragone told the BBC, an operational shift is imperative, the destructive cycle must end for the sake of saving lives. Diving into the numbers reveals the true horror of the situation. Over 1.14 million Russian troops have either perished, been wounded, or taken prisoner since the conflict erupted. On the battlefield, the count of destroyed Russian equipment is staggering. More than 11,300 tanks and around 34,250 armored vehicles are now rendered useless. The airspace isn't safe either. Russia has lost approximately 428 planes and 346 helicopters, and a jaw-dropping 77,860 unmanned aerial vehicles to Ukraine's defenses. But it's not merely the human and material costs that are crippling Russia. The economic fallout paints an even bleaker picture. Sanctions have frozen around $340 billion in reserves, while losses in the energy sector have totaled $78.5 billion over 3 painful years. With companies fleeing Russia, the economy is reeling, with a mere 1% growth recorded for the first 9 months of 2025, a staggering drop from the preceding year. Amid these bleak facts lies the realization of a devastating irony. Instead of weakening NATO as he had hoped, Putin's actions have only bolstered the alliance. Following the invasion, both Finland and Sweden have sought NATO membership, directly countering Putin's objectives. Now, with enhanced defenses in the Baltic Sea, NATO's capabilities have multiplied, placing greater pressure on Russia and highlighting the missteps of its leadership. This looming disaster evokes the question, how long can Putin stubbornly cling to power when every passing day reveals the crumbling foundation of his empire? As time stretches onward, can he push for negotiations, or will his misplaced confidence blind him to the reality that surrounds him? The draw of warfare beckons him forward while the walls of his influence steadily close in, reminding us that the end may be closer than he realizes. In the midst of the chaos caused by the ongoing war in Ukraine, a new arrival to the battlefield is shaking up the dynamics with sheer audacity. The FP2 drone, crafted by Firepoint, has quickly advanced into mass production, and its deployment marks a pivotal shift in Ukraine's military capabilities. Unlike its predecessor, the FP1, the FP2 is designed for rapid mobilization, emerging as a game-changer for ground operations. Imagine the hum of engines as military trucks roll silently across the landscape, their cargo hidden from Russian eyes. A sense of suspense envelopes the air as Ukrainian operators maneuver these trucks closer to enemy lines. With every inch, tension rises, a palpable feeling of anticipation. When the time is right, the FP2 drones are unleashed, darting into the fray with fierce precision, leaving the enemy scrambling. Notably, the FP2 excels in short-range strikes, perfect for hitting entrenched positions where the enemy has dug in for a protracted fight. It's a brawler on the battlefield, packing a punch where it matters most. And the best part? This fierce combatant cost a mere $55,000 to produce. Imagine the shockwaves this fact sends through Russian command. How can such might be so economically feasible? Flexibility is key here. While some may breathe a sigh of relief at its reduced range, about 1,200 kilometers less than the FP1, Ukraine's arsenal is not limited. They possess ample drones capable of reaching further into hostile territory. This drone isn't just a utility, it's a sophisticated weapon designed for the guerrilla warfare style that Ukraine now embodies. But what does this mean for the economy? As vital as these innovations are, the toll of war weighs heavy. It's a stark reality, while Ukraine arms itself against a formidable foe, the nation's financial health hangs by a thread. The echoes of conflict aren't just found on the battlefield, they resonate throughout the country's economic landscape. Without decisive action, the potential for financial ruin looms ominously. As the world watches, the question remains, will Ukraine's resilience translate into survival, or will the relentless pressure of the war break its spirit? The answer lies within the hearts of those fighting, and the innovative technologies that may turn the tide. But will these advancements be enough to offset the impending economic catastrophe? Only time will tell. In the heart of a relentless conflict, Ukraine has unveiled a powerful new weapon in its arsenal, the FP2 drone. As the war drags on, the effectiveness of this technology is coming to light, igniting a firestorm of chaos behind enemy lines. But can this new piece of hardware truly turn the tide of battle? Recent reports reveal that on November 2, the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, launched a series of precision strikes utilizing the FP2 drones in occupied territories. These attacks directly targeted Russian military warehouses and bases that supply troops stationed far from the front. The SBU made it clear in a Telegram update that the elite Alpha Special Forces conducted these strikes, showcasing their pivotal role in Ukraine's defense strategy. The Alpha Group is not just any special forces unit. Known for their versatility and effectiveness, they've engaged in everything from capturing high-value targets to executing complex black operations since the onset of the invasion. Early on, they dismantled a convoy of Chechen paramilitaries en route to Kiev, marking their footprint early in this tumultuous war. Their involvement in significant battles, including fights around Kharkiv, further cements their reputation. To add to the urgency, the SBU shared footage of the drone strikes, displaying the devastation wrought by these high-tech machines. Each strike resonated with immense impact, reflecting the desperate stakes of the conflict. With Russia unable to dispute these successful operations, Ukraine's air superiority appears to be transforming the battlefield dynamics. But can this technological edge ultimately ensure victory for Ukraine? As conflicts rage on and losses mount, the ongoing question remains, will the FP2 drones shift the balance, or are they merely a temporary flicker of hope in a protracted war? At the same time, the landscape is shifting in Ukraine, fraught with a mix of fear and trepidation. Each strike not only highlights the military capabilities of Ukraine but also casts a long shadow over the future of Russian forces that increasingly find themselves stretched thin across the battlefield, as personnel and resources deplete month by month. The ground quakes as these drone strikes unfold, leaving many to ponder if they signal a turning point for Ukraine. The ominous clouds of war hang thick in the air, but will the resilience of Ukraine's forces, bolstered by innovative technology, lead them to glory, or will the toll of this dark conflict drown their hopes? The conflict in Ukraine shows no signs of resolution. Vladimir Putin's orders continue to send Russian soldiers into a devastating resistance. Each month, thousands of lives are lost, all because a leader refuses to recognize his own failure. It's as if Russia is caught in a downward spiral, deepening a war that has already swung against them. Putin's ambitions to dominate Ukraine have failed dramatically, resulting in significant consequences that reverberate through Russia as a whole. One figure weighing in on the dire situation is NATO Admiral Giuseppe Carvo-Dragone. Since taking the helm of NATO's military committee in early 2025, Dragone has asserted that the conflict has bogged down to a critical state where negotiating peace is now a necessity. The strategy intended by Putin to gradually deplete Ukraine's resolve has backfired spectacularly, entangling Russia in a quagmire of its own design. The statistics speak volumes. To date, over 1.14 million Russian troops have been reported killed, injured, or captured since the onset of this catastrophic invasion. The losses don't stop there. More than 11,300 tanks and around 34,250 armored vehicles are either ruined or non-operational. Looking skyward, Russia's aerial capabilities are in shambles, approximately 1,200 anti-aircraft units, 428 aircraft, and nearly 350 helicopters lie in ruins, alongside a staggering 77,860 unmanned drones lost to Ukrainian defenses. But these figures merely scratch the surface. The reality is that this prolonged conflict has drained Russia of both manpower and financial resources. The Ministry of Finance reports crippling economic hardships as sanctions slice through the economy, with approximately $340 billion in reserves frozen and energy sector losses totaling nearly $78.5 billion. More than 460 companies have exited the Russian market since the war began. Indeed, the war that should have taken merely weeks to conclude has transformed into a multi-year struggle fraught with challenges, revealing layers of complexity and deception. The original plans for a swift victory have morphed into a protracted and costly conflict, with Russia's economic growth plummeting drastically. As a troubling sign, the economy expanded by only 1% in the first 9 months of 2025, a stark contrast to previous growth patterns. The struggle in Ukraine has also catalyzed surprising developments beyond its borders. Instead of weakening NATO, Putin's actions have fortified it. With Sweden and Finland now members, NATO's strategic position has strengthened dramatically in the face of what was originally intended to be a deterrent to expansion. The very expansion he sought to prevent is now a reality as NATO adapts to emerging threats with enhanced collective defense strategies. The tale spins deeper, revealing potential weaknesses within Russia. A distressing strategy dubbed deathnomics has emerged, suggesting that amidst loss, some Russians are drawn to fight, driven by desperation for income. Yet as countless lives are sacrificed for temporary monetary gain, fear replaces the pride once felt. The shadows of war creep ever closer, transforming society's values. As morale wanes, the thought of resistance becomes a haunting specter. The Kremlin lends aid to the construction of false narratives, luring individuals into acts of violence through enticing promises. Ads tempting the impoverished with flexible schedules and lucrative pay for committing arson permeate despairing communities. This sinister plot aims to fabricate a national narrative of unrest, collapsing Ukraine's unity from within while drowning its own people in chaos. What will it take for the Russian leadership to reassess their path? Can they recognize the perilous territory they have wandered into? As the war rages on, a new realization grips the collective consciousness. Continuing this path may bring only more ruin, not just for Ukraine, but for Russia itself. The weight of the decisions made now will echo through history, leaving pivotal questions that demand answers in a world desperate for peace.